I rushed into the treatment room after hearing my husband was brought in. The doctors, nurses, and my husband all looked at me. There was a moment of silence, but when I saw my husband's face, I knew he was safe and not in any immediate danger. But the next moment shocked me. My name is Tanya, and I'm a 30-year-old nurse. My husband, Steve, is 32 and works for the government. What drew me to him, unlike my past boyfriends, was how serious and responsible he seemed. Maybe it's because of my job as a nurse, but I've always found it easy to care for others. I enjoy helping people and making them feel supported. That's why helping out my past boyfriends, lending them money, or doing favors for them, became a regular thing for me, even when I knew I probably shouldn't. Many of my fellow nurses are the same, and we often talk about relationships, but my turning point came when I met Steve. I met him on a group blind date with other nurses. He seemed quiet and serious, a type I had never dated before. I liked him right away, and there were no other girls interested in him since they thought he was too plain. After a little push from me, we exchanged phone numbers, and soon after, I asked him out. Our relationship lasted for 3 years with no major fights or problems. It was smooth, which is rare since many relationships break up after a few months. But things went well with Steve. After 3 years, I told him, things are going well, so should we get married? He proposed, and we tied the knot. Steve didn't have much dating experience before me. His hobbies were reading and playing video games at home. He didn't go out much, but he loved talking about books and never ran out of things to discuss. Even though he wasn't an outdoorsy person, he had many online friends he gamed with. Sometimes, we would play games together while chatting online. Since we started dating, Steve began going out more, mostly because I'd suggest it. He wasn't against going out, he just didn't have anyone to do it with before. Steve's family lives about a 2-hour drive away. I don't see them much, but they seem kind. Steve is the youngest of 3 siblings, and his parents are elderly. After our wedding, we only visited them once during New Year's. We exchange gifts during the holidays, and I call them sometimes, but our schedules don't line up since I work night shifts. Steve and I go out together when we both have days off, and we share the household chores. I thought everything was fine between us. However, about 3 months ago, I started noticing something strange with Steve. One evening after I got home from work, I found him asleep on the sofa. A beer can was lying on the table. I said to my husband, "You'll catch a cold." He looked at me sleepily and rubbed his eyes. "Isn't it unusual for you to be sleeping here and drinking beer?" I asked. I was at an online drinking party with my gaming friends. I had too much fun and drank too much, he replied. I didn't fully understand his online world, but I thought as long as he was having fun, it was okay. That turned out to be a mistake. After that, similar incidents kept happening. One day, I noticed my husband's hair had changed. "What's up with your hair?" I asked. He had never dyed his hair before, but now it was styled and brown. "Is this okay for your job?" I asked, knowing that as a government employee, his workplace had strict rules. "What's wrong with it? I just thought I should enjoy dressing up while I'm still young. What do you think? Does it look good on me?" My husband had always been simple and didn't care much about his appearance, but now he was suddenly different. I didn't think the new look suited him, but I didn't know what to say. "It doesn't look bad," I said softly. A few days later, he got his ears pierced. I was confused. Was he going through a midlife crisis? I tried to ignore it at first, but finally, I couldn't stay quiet. "What's going on with you lately?" I asked him directly. "Nothing," he replied, and then he went to the bedroom without saying more. I knew something was wrong, but I was too busy with work. A nurse had recently retired, and I was filling in, leaving me with little time to focus on Steve. Around this time, Steve told me, "My dad hasn't been feeling well lately, so I'm going home for the weekend to check on him." His father was old, so I understood why Steve was concerned. I agreed, and after that, he started going away every weekend. I still tried to care for him in small ways, like cooking for him and texting during work, but he rarely responded. Just when I was thinking we needed to have a serious talk, I received a shocking phone call at work. "Tanya, the police are trying to reach you," one of my colleagues said, handing me the phone. I felt a wave of anxiety. "Why are the police calling me?" I asked, picking up the phone. The officer explained that Steve had been in an accident and was taken to the emergency room. "What? Is my husband okay?" I asked in a panic. The officer assured me that it wasn't life-threatening and that Steve had been taken to the hospital where I worked. I rushed to the emergency ward. asking the nurses where he was. When I found the treatment room and opened the door, everyone inside stared at me. "Excuse me, I heard my husband was brought in," I said. The doctor looked confused, and the nurse glanced nervously at me. I felt uneasy, but when my eyes met my husband's, I was relieved. The nurse quickly explained that Steve had a serious leg injury, and they had to cut his pants off to treat him. When I looked at him again, his pants had already been removed. Suddenly, Steve noticed me looking and shouted, "Tanya, don't look at me." I was confused. As a nurse, I wondered if he was embarrassed for me to see him like this, but in the medical field, it's common to cut clothing when there's a severe injury, so it didn't seem like a big deal. "Just get out of here," my husband yelled, but I didn't understand why he was acting this way. The doctors and nurses continued working quickly to treat him, ignoring his outburst, which was only natural. They couldn't afford to stop. Then, something strange caught my attention. "What is that?" I muttered to myself. On the inside of my husband's right thigh, there was a tattoo. His injury was on his left leg, but the tattoo was on his right. The tattoo had a woman's name written on it, Yasmin. Shocked, I asked, "Who is Yasmin?" Steve looked panicked, but I left the room to let the medical team finish treating him. Later, I spoke with a nurse who told me that Steve hadn't been brought to the hospital alone. He was with a woman around his age, and the nurse assumed they were a couple. When I asked the woman's name, she said it was Yasmin, the same name on my husband's tattoo. I couldn't believe it. Was my husband having an affair? My coworker described Yasmin as having brown hair, pierced ears, and, shockingly, a tattoo of my husband's name on her thigh. It was clear now, they were having an affair. But what kind of person tattoos their lover's name on their body? I thought to myself that this woman must be unstable. As I processed all of this, I remembered the call from the police. They had first tried to reach Steve's parents, but since they couldn't drive, they gave the police my contact information. This meant Steve's parents were likely worried, so I called my father-in-law. "Is Steve going to be okay?" my father-in-law asked, clearly concerned. I reassured him, saying Steve had been in an accident but wasn't in any life-threatening danger. Hearing this, my father-in-law sounded relieved. I then asked, "By the way, Dad, are you feeling better?" My father-in-law was confused. He had no idea what I was talking about. I explained, "Steve said you weren't feeling well, and that's why he's been going to take care of you every weekend." My father-in-law was shocked. "I've been perfectly fine," he said. It was then that I realized Steve had been lying to me all along. My father-in-law was in good health, so where had my husband been going every weekend? If Steve wasn't going to his parents' house, then he must have been going to meet the woman he was having an affair with, but I had no proof. After my shift, I went home without visiting Steve, who was staying in the hospital for treatment. Once I was home, I searched through his belongings. The evidence was easy to find: photos of him with the woman, hotel receipts, and even an email confirming a reservation at a romantic resort. It was clear that they had their accident on the way back from the resort. The crash happened on a mountain road, but thankfully no one else was hurt. Steve and Yasmin weren't in life-threatening condition, but Steve's leg injury would make walking difficult for a while. Normally, I should have been worried about my husband's condition as his wife, but I didn't feel that way anymore. I couldn't believe he had lied about visiting his parents and instead used that excuse to cover up his affair. I wondered if his sudden changes, like dyeing his hair and getting his ears pierced, were influenced by this woman. I spoke to a nurse I trusted and asked her to refer me to a good divorce lawyer. The next day, I went to the hospital to drop off Steve's belongings. He seemed confused, like he couldn't remember what had happened the previous day in the treatment room. But honestly, I didn't care anymore. I left without talking to him because I had to start my shift. After work, I met with the lawyer and explained everything. He told me that with all the evidence I had, I could easily file for divorce. All I wanted was to get divorced as quickly as possible. I couldn't imagine living with him again after the betrayal. My anger was much stronger than any sadness I felt. I found a new place to live and moved out, leaving only Steve's belongings behind in the house. I decided to wait until he was discharged from the hospital before finalizing the divorce. I didn't want any issues since he was in the hospital where I worked. When the day came, I went to pick Steve up from the hospital. On the way, I told him we needed to make a quick stop. He looked confused, but agreed. I took him to a family restaurant near our house, where my lawyer was already waiting. Steve seemed puzzled and tired from standing on his injured leg, so he sat down quietly. I handed him the divorce papers. "Divorce? Why?" Steve shouted, sounding shocked. I stared at him angrily for a moment. What do you mean? Why, you had an affair, you even had your accident during your romantic trip. I found all the evidence at home. And you lied about your father being sick just to see this woman. Steve's face turned pale. Do you think I'm naive? I continued. Yasmin, the woman you cheated with, is already out of the hospital. Her injuries weren't as bad as yours. I can't believe she was brought to the same hospital where I work. I smiled bitterly, and Steve looked even paler. You will pay for the pain you've caused me, I said, pushing the divorce papers and a pen toward him. He didn't pick up the pen. Is it just your leg that's injured, or have you lost the use of your hand too? I said sarcastically. He finally picked up the pen but wouldn't sign. He just stared at the papers. Why don't you sign? Are you afraid of starting over? Do you think this was just a game? I pressed him. He froze, as if I had hit a nerve. I glared at him coldly. You're kidding, right? I can't stay with a man who has his mistress's name tattooed on his body, I said. Steve looked at me, shocked. What are you talking about? He stammered. Maybe he was trying to play dumb, but I wasn't falling for it anymore. You really don't remember? I asked Steve. I was there when you were rushed to the emergency room. You were yelling at me not to look. Suddenly, Steve's face changed. Sound familiar? I saw the tattoo on your thigh, the one with Yasmin's name. What kind of man tattoos his mistress's name on his body? Steve was stunned, speechless. No, it's not what you think, he mumbled. I just sighed. My husband, with his dyed hair, pierced ears, and now a tattoo of the woman he cheated on me with. It was too much. If you wanted to be with her, you should have waited until after the divorce, I told him. While Steve was still in the hospital, I actually met Yasmin. It wasn't planned. We just bumped into each other. She was lost, looking for the gift shop, and asked me for directions. I pointed her to the shop and said, "Oh, and you're Yasmin, right? My husband is Steve." Her face went pale, and she hurried away, way faster than someone who was supposedly injured. I couldn't help but call after her, "Please don't run in the hospital." It was clear she was more embarrassed than I was. She probably knew I worked here, but never expected to bump into me like that. Later, I asked Steve if Yasmin had dumped him. He hadn't expected me to find out about the affair and seemed desperate to stay married, thinking he could avoid paying alimony. I couldn't believe he thought he wouldn't get caught with her name tattooed on his body. Nurses have a knack for attracting the wrong guys, I guess. When I married Steve, I thought he was different, serious, loyal, but getting a tattoo of the woman he cheated on me with, that was just the worst. I decided to leave everything to the lawyers. I had already moved out, so I told Steve he'd have to find his own way home from the hospital. Goodbye, I said, leaving him there looking pitiful, his mouth hanging open. He'd be stuck with a leg injury for a while, but honestly, he deserved it. The divorce went smoothly. I even got alimony, which left Steve broke and bankrupt. Not only that, but he also found out Yasmin was married to one of his colleagues at work. To make things even more awkward, her husband was one of Steve's online gaming buddies. Her husband filed for alimony too, and Steve had to quit his job as the scandal spread. I didn't care about the rumors or whether Steve kept his job. After the divorce was finalized, Steve's parents reached out to me, furious at what happened. When I explained everything, they apologized and promised to never let Steve hurt me again. Word got around among my coworkers, and they all laughed about it. Now, I laugh about it too. I live alone now, free to do whatever I want, and I'm happier than ever.
I snagged your rich husband. The first call I received from my younger sister, Lois, who hadn't replied to any of my messages, came just before our mother's funeral. I just got back from Hawaii with Keith. I brought you some chocolate souvenirs. Enraged at her thoughtlessness, I lost control and yelled at her in front of the entire family. You can have my husband, just get to the funeral already. Taken aback by my outburst and what I'd said, Lois could only respond with a bewildered what from the other end of the line. After giving her the address of the funeral home, I angrily hung up. I knew she tried calling back, so I turned off my phone, sat down in the seat designated for the family, and tried to gather myself. My name is Emily, and I just turned 38. I grew up in a family of 4. My parents and my sister, who's 6 years younger than me. My parents were strict, especially with me, the eldest, but they always spoiled Lois because of her charming looks. Whenever Lois wanted something, she would flash an irresistible smile and say, "Emily, I want this," and I would almost always give in. Regrettably, this habit persisted even after she grew up, and she became an extremely troublesome sister. My father passed away due to illness 8 years ago, and my mother received a terminal diagnosis about 6 months ago. She had been in and out of the hospital. I married Keith, a senior colleague from work, 2 years ago and moved away from my family home to an apartment near my office. Over the past 6 months, I was driving an hour each way to take care of my ailing mother in between work. Lois had moved back home and quit her job a year ago after breaking up with her then boyfriend, but she insisted that I was better at caregiving and kept pushing the responsibility onto me. So I took a month off from work to care for our mother. But despite my best efforts, she passed away 2 days ago. And where was Lois? She had jetted off to Hawaii a week prior. I tried my best to convince her not to leave, but she wouldn't listen and went off anyway. At the funeral, after the priest finished speaking, friends and family began to pay their respects. It was a testament to my kind-hearted mother that not only relatives but many of her friends also came to mourn. Several colleagues from my company also showed up. I'm sorry for your loss. Thanks, I'm just grateful that you allowed me to take time off to spend with my mother in her final moments. He's my father-in-law, the president of the company I work for. He's been extremely understanding about my situation and has helped me a great deal. But where is Keith? I haven't seen him here. Well, he's been overseas on a business trip since last week, and I haven't been able to reach him. Oh, I see. I'll ask the sales manager about it. Because it's a large company he runs, Keith and I are in different departments. Keith works in sales and constantly complains about always being busy with business trips. I tried to understand that he was not here during this difficult time, but I was anxious about having to handle everything on my own without being able to contact him or my sister. Meanwhile, my father-in-law took time out of his busy schedule to attend the funeral, and his support almost brought me to tears. I felt so grateful for it, I had to hold back the tears that were almost overflowing. In the limo heading to the crematory with the rest of the family, I turned my phone back on, hoping that Keith might have tried to contact me. To my surprise, there were nearly 30 voicemails, most of them from Lois. Answer your phone. You can't just make up some ridiculous lies because you're upset that I took Keith from you. What I heard was her yelling voice. She took Keith from me? Had I heard something like that when she called before the funeral? I was too preoccupied with handling the mourners to comprehend properly what she was saying. Lois and Keith are having an affair. No, that can't be true. I was startled and felt sudden agitation. Does that mean Keith was on a trip with her? Seriously. When I hastily checked the voicemail, there were several from my husband. I'm so sorry. You're a strong woman, Emily. You can survive on your own. But Lois, I need to support her. So, let's break up. Hearing Keith's message, which sounded almost like a line from a soap opera, I muttered to myself, I wish I hadn't heard it. Why did I have to find out that my husband and sister were having an affair and having a great time in Hawaii during my mother's funeral? You need to come right away if you want to say your final goodbye to Mom. We're already heading to the crematory. Reluctantly, I called my sister and told her, that's not funny. Stop lying. You're just bitter because I took Keith from you. But it's the truth. You must be upset about losing your husband. Yeah, he's the next company president and rich. I understand how you feel, Emily. But there are good lies and bad lies, you know. You're an adult. You should know better. I never thought I'd hear that from you. I was surprised, though, to find out that you and Keith had been cheating, I retorted. Lois sounded really happy. Ever since we were kids, she would play tricks on me and laugh out loud when I fell for them. I sighed in frustration. Anyway, it's not the time for this. If you want to say your final goodbye to Mom, come now. I am tired of that lie, so why don't you ask his father? I heard Keith's voice on the other end of the phone. They probably didn't expect me to bring up his father. My husband, who was apparently right next to Lois, took the phone. Emily, is that true? If you don't believe it, do whatever you want. I'm hanging up now. After a while, we arrived at the crematory. This is my last moment to say goodbye to Mom, and my mind is a mess with the rush of these past few days and the grief of losing my mother. I no longer knew what to do, and I found myself with tears streaming down my cheeks. Seeing me like this, one of my relatives patted my back, saying, Your mom would surely be grateful to you, Emily, who took good care of her until the end. I stood in front of my mother's casket and said my final goodbye. Mom, thank you for everything. I'm gonna miss you so much. It was right at the moment when her casket was carried out for the cremation. Wait a minute. Where is Mom? With a loud voice, my sister and husband rushed in. When Lois saw the casket disappearing behind the doors, she tried to cling to it, but the doors closed mercilessly in front of her. No, I haven't said goodbye to Mom yet, Lois was wailing, and Keith was standing behind her, stunned. We should move, it's disturbing to others. Why didn't you tell me, Emily? I couldn't see Mom at the end. It's your fault. My fault? Absolutely not. If it was this bad, you should have told me earlier. I can't count how many times I've explained our mother's health condition to Lois. Every single time, she'd just brush it off, saying, I don't know how to handle any of this. I'll leave it to you, Emily. That's right, this all happened because you didn't explain how serious your mother's condition was. It's your fault. Even my husband Keith started blaming me. I stared at them in fury. Then what were you two doing all this time? I raised my voice. Gasping, they finally fell silent. If you can't say it, I will. You were on a fun-filled romantic getaway in Hawaii together, weren't you? The relatives started to murmur as they had been observing this in disbelief. Up until now, whenever relatives asked, what's wrong with Lois? Or isn't Keith coming? I'd been making excuses for them so that they wouldn't look like the bad guys. Mom, I'm sorry. I really wanted to say goodbye to you more quietly. Apologizing in my mind, I knew I had to clear up things here and steeled myself. When exactly did this affair start? You knew I was on leave caring for Mom, right? I was having a hard time. I asked for help numerous times, but all you two did was spend fun time together, didn't you? Enough. It's all your fault, Emily. It's because you didn't keep Keith close enough. What's that supposed to mean? You need to prioritize your husband more. He said he was bored at home because all you talk about is work and caregiving. Poor Keith. Oh, so that's what he said? As I glared at Keith, he quickly looked away, avoiding my gaze. Emily, you managed to marry a rich future company president, but you got conceited. That's why he got snatched away by me. You always do this, Emily. In reality, every time I had a boyfriend in high school or university, Lois stole them from me. The only time it didn't happen was with Keith because Lois was already living with her boyfriend at the time. What a shame. From now on, I'll be with Keith and become the future president's wife. So break up with him. Fine, you can have Keith. I'll divorce him. By then, I didn't care about anything. When I decided to marry Keith, I had no idea he was the son of the president. He was working at a regional branch and came to work at the headquarters in my department. Keith was bright, friendly, and good at connecting with everyone, quickly becoming a part of the team. I started to have feelings for him as he approached me. We started dating, and when he proposed eventually, I happily accepted. It wasn't until I visited his parents' house that I found out his father was the president of the company I worked for. It was a real surprise, so promise me don't come back later begging that you don't want a divorce. I won't do that. You're sure you want to leave me? Yes, I am. If you leave me, no man will marry a workaholic like you. You know that, right? I can live my life as I like on my own, but for today, please say your final goodbye to Mom properly. Keith and Lois exchanged looks, smirking as if they had won. The relatives furrowed their brows, watching the situation. I'm really sorry for showing such an unpleasant scene. I apologize to my relatives. I heard Lois whisper, you always play the good girl. I hate this about you. I had put up with a lot because she was my little sister, but now I'll stop considering her as such. I'm getting divorced from Keith, and I have no family left. All I need to do is prepare myself for that. I bit my lower lip hard. 2 weeks have passed since then. I moved all my stuff out of the apartment I had been living in and started living in a new condominium that I had leased near the office. I even put my parents' house up for sale. There's nothing left. Lois began living with Keith as I moved out. Of course, Keith and I have already completed our divorce papers and submitted them to the courthouse. I'm sure they're happily starting their newlywed life right now. Well then, I finished handling Mom's paperwork. Now the revenge begins. Watch over me, Mom. I smiled at my mother's portrait, picturing the events to come. Enjoy your newlywed life while you can, you too. The next day, while I was at the office for my job reinstatement, a lot of voicemail messages piled up on my cell phone. Hey, what's going on? We're divorced, aren't we? Why do I have to pay $30,000? Anticipating that they might come to my new place if I left them alone, I decided to meet at a local diner. As soon as we started talking, Keith was frothing at the mouth and yelling. I received a document from a lawyer. What's this all about? We're already divorced, aren't we? Exactly. I don't understand. I had asked a lawyer to claim $40,000 from Keith as my share of the property and $30,000 from Lois for her part of the medical care coverage for our mother. The documents must have arrived at their place. It's something that they should have expected, but they probably didn't. I was exasperated. You just need to pay what you owe. That's not fair. Listen, don't think you can get away with what you've done. I've suffered from tremendous emotional distress. Should I sue you for that as well? Emotional distress. You cheated, that's a fact. So pay up. They fell silent for a moment, probably realizing they couldn't argue with the law. Then, after a while, Lois started looking down at me. So, Emily, you're just after the money after all. Fine, I'll let Keith pay. If I borrow money from my dad, we can easily prepare the $70,000. Keith, I know you don't have any savings. Lois, are you really okay being with a guy who doesn't have any money? Keith will become the president soon. Then he'll be rich. It's just a bit of patience. Oh, Lois, you're after the money too, aren't you? No, I have plenty of love. Dad has been saying for a long time that he'll retire when he turns 65. So in 2 years, I'll be the president. Really? It'd be great if you could actually become the president. I'm definitely going to become one. I'm the only son. I wonder. Finally, I couldn't hold back any longer and burst out laughing. I can't believe this. Has she finally lost it? I heard my sister saying. But the real stage of the revenge that I had set up is just starting. Keith, you've been missing work for quite a long time, saying it's because of the family funeral, right? Well, my mother-in-law is family too. That's true, but the company knows what you've actually been doing. Huh? You don't know that your father was kind enough to attend Mom's funeral, do you? I had purposely not informed Keith and Lois about this, so Keith believed that his father knew nothing about what was going on. I've let the company and the president, your father, know that you've lied about taking family leave for caregiving and went off to Hawaii with your mistress instead. Oh, that was you? Never did any caregiving at all. You have the gall to act so brazenly. And you've been off work with Lois on several of your business trips, haven't you? I've reported that too. How did you find out? Lois has been posting photos on social media showing where and when she went out, plus there were a few pictures with you in them. How shocking. Huh? You knew about my social media? It's the same account you had back when you were in high school. Of course, I'd know. Lois looked uncomfortable, and Keith was taken aback by my words. Hey, is it true that Dad knows everything? Just as my mother was family to you, your father considered her his family. Of course, he would know about the family funeral, as it should be reported to the company. Even after the funeral, he cared about me and had contacted me several times, so I have reported all the past events to him. He is quite furious. Also, he said he has absolutely no intention of making you the next president. Huh. But I'm his son. He said he doesn't remember ever saying that our company follows the principle of hereditary succession. Also, he told me to convey that he doesn't need a son who would do such disloyal acts. Huh. So Keith isn't going to be the president. As I silently smiled at them, their faces turned pale. I decided to press them even more. And just to let you know, I'm becoming the president starting next month. Huh. Actually, I had just received the official notice from the president and my superiors at the company. I have officially been appointed as the new president. There is no way they'd let you become the president. If you think it's a lie, why don't you call your father right now and ask? Keith frantically called his father. Lois, his new wife, watched anxiously. So, Emily is becoming the president. It was true. So I can't become the president's wife? If I knew that, I wouldn't have stolen you from Emily. But you just told me you love me. That was including your money. What did you say? I couldn't stand the couple starting their squabble in front of me, so I got up. If you want to fight, do it somewhere else. Oh, I'll be expecting the payment, thanks. Wait, please don't abandon me. Please support me, sis. I apologize. I effectively sidestepped the hands that the two of them stretched out in desperation and left the place. After that, the two of them ended up getting a divorce. My ex-husband Keith was demoted by his father and eventually quit his job. Now he's working part-time jobs every day to pay what he owes me. Lois is said to be working in a bar at night. Apparently, she was doing well at first, but she was fooled by a bad man and ended up in a terrible situation. I've become the president. That being said, it's for a small company that's like a tenant in the main company building. a subsidiary in the caregiving industry that was established based on the proposal I submitted during my caregiving leave. Still, the caregiving business is expected to expand in the future, and I'm expected to do well. I'll do my best from now on. Earning only $750 a month is like a college student's allowance. Even students working at bars make more. Having a low-income wife is a disgrace. Maybe you should divorce her so our son can find a better wife. After all, he's the ultimate triple threat. My mother-in-law keeps making snide comments after seeing a pay stub, but it's not actually my pay stub. My name is Amanda. I'm a 32-year-old nurse, and I've been married to John for 5 years. We met at a college club, started dating, and eventually got married. We met at a party when he was a medical student, and I was a nursing student. John hasn't passed the medical licensing exam after failing twice and taking 3 years off. He is currently working part-time and studying hard for the exam. I'm working as a full-time nurse, so I'm the primary breadwinner. He's not the type to brag about making money in cosmetic surgery and posting pictures of a $468,020 Rolls-Royce on social media. He's serious about reading accounts of people who've lost family members to illness, checking the number of people affected by infectious diseases daily, and reading literature on Japan's healthcare system. I respected him even though he wasn't a doctor yet. He genuinely wanted to become a doctor who saves his patients, so I didn't abandon him despite his lack of income and entering his 30s. He kept the fact that he wasn't a doctor yet a secret from his parents. Sorry, my mom is too nosy. It's fine. I support you so you don't have to worry about your parents. Live your life the way you want. This is short term. That's why it remained a secret. The reason it wasn't discovered was that he worked at night as a security guard at the hospital where I worked, so he was technically employed there. He had knowledge and could obtain information from my stories on the job. No one suspected he wasn't a doctor yet because he could talk like one. So to his seldom seen in-laws, I said, yes, patients really like him. I believe that while cruel lies hurt people, kind lies sometimes save them. Telling a patient, you have 3 months left and there's no chance of recovery, is a countdown. It's worse than saying, you look good today, and you ate a lot. That's how people are. On the other hand, my mother-in-law, who is the complete opposite of my serious and honest husband, has a very harsh personality. She's the typical overbearing mother-in-law. She looks down on me for being a mere nurse married to her son, the doctor. There must have been so many better options, like a beautiful doctor in dermatology. I always apologize and bow my head when she talks like that. I wholeheartedly support him in his pursuit of becoming a doctor, but at this point, he's just a high school graduate with extensive medical knowledge working part-time. He's not even a medical intern. But my husband is genuinely grateful to me, always saying, thank you for everything. I silently supported him. In fact, I'm also very busy with work. Our combined income was barely enough to make ends meet, but it couldn't be helped. I didn't care much about money when I entered this field because I genuinely admired Florence Nightingale. Currently, I'm a nurse in internal medicine, the most demanding field in terms of workload. The thought of wanting more money hasn't even crossed my mind. As long as we can live, eat, and stay healthy, that's enough. Isn't that ultimately what life's about? Despite the fact that I'm supporting my husband's living expenses and tuition, my mother-in-law goes around the neighborhood saying, my son is a doctor and earns well. In the first place, if he were a serious doctor, he wouldn't want his mother to brag about his income, good or bad. But my mother-in-law doesn't care and only talks about money, money, money. As her son, he has no choice but to silently endure it. She is completely unaware that he is actually working as a security guard in uniform at the hospital instead of walking briskly in a white coat like she brags about. Even if he were walking briskly in a white coat, it's not something to brag about and gossip about. I understand the feeling, but it should be restrained. I was worried that my husband's mental state might be affected and that he might fail the medical licensing exam because he's barely hanging on to becoming a doctor. If he ends up spending his entire life as a security guard after sticking it out for this long, it would be a shame. Moreover, to put it mildly, his personality is well suited for a doctor. His only weakness seems to be his kindness. That's why my mother-in-law speculates and says things like, my son makes $373,000 a year. For him, knowing that's false only adds more pressure. I once gently voiced my disapproval about it. I think it would be better for the patients if you didn't talk so much about his job because it might cause problems. After all, if you think about it from the opposite perspective, would you want to go to a doctor whose mother is constantly boasting about her son when you're sick? But my mother-in-law doesn't care. Shut up, you're just a nurse. You should be grateful that you could marry a doctor. It's luckier than winning the $3 million lottery. Money can't buy status, you nursing school graduate. She spews such verbal abuse. Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you for allowing me to marry John. I respect him both as a doctor and as a person, so please just leave him alone. You're so annoying. We can still make him divorce you and remarry. It would be pitiful if our future grandchild inherits your low IQ blood. This is beyond harassment. It's close to a violation of human rights. But I kept quiet. Somehow, compared to saving the patient's life or a sense of mission in my work, my mother-in-law's sarcasm seemed very trivial. I didn't really take her seriously. But as those days continued, that day finally came. In fact, my in-laws' house is a 30-minute express train ride from our house, so we don't visit each other much. I'm busy with work, so I wasn't around them much, which is why this lie has been working. However, I don't know if she was bored or just lost her patience, but my mother-in-law showed up at our house unannounced. What a cramped house. Why does my pride and joy of a son have to live in such a poor-looking house? She exclaimed. Looking at the row of medical books, she narrowed her eyes and said, "Well, he is my son, after all," and took a picture with her phone. But most of the books were for the national medical exam, so I was secretly nervous. Since this year's books were there, it would normally give away that he's still a student. My vital signs were in danger of betraying me, but I did my best to deceive her. Mother-in-law, I'm sorry. We're both quite busy with work, so we haven't had time to find a bigger place, especially lately. I casually urged her to go home, but then she began going through my home of all things. Hey, what's with these weird dishes? If you're a doctor, you should buy Wedgwood. Yes, I'm sorry. They're from the dollar store. What did you say? Dollar store? I'm throwing them away. No, we couldn't afford luxuries because we were spending money on my husband's textbooks and tuition, so we cut costs on things like plates that didn't affect our simple meals. As long as we can serve food on them, it's fine. For now, passing the exam is the most important thing. My husband was, by chance, working as a security guard at the hospital at the time. It was a good thing he wasn't home. I didn't want to see him hurt, so I planned to get my mother-in-law to leave while he was at work. But she didn't stop rifling through our things. I'm going to throw away these clothes that look like a student's. If you're a doctor, you should buy high-end branded clothes. My husband's favorite clothes were thrown away. And then, what is this? A piece of junk watch? If you're a doctor, buy a luxury watch. She threw it away, seemingly unaware of the convenience of a smartwatch. The belongings of his that were being thrown away one after another were bought with the little money he had earned. He would have preferred to be in an OR treating patients instead of standing outside with his pride in tatters, but he was working hard for the sake of his dreams and for the sweat he had shed. But there was no stopping her now. It's because he married a poor girl that you have a poor life, even though he's a doctor. It's a wonder you don't live in a tower mansion. Unbelievable. I was thinking of going shopping together and at least getting you to buy me a bag or something. Statement was ultimately despicable. I had no choice but to point out that what my mother-in-law was expecting from my husband, student or not, was fundamentally different than how we really lived. I was a fellow medical professional. Gold digging for a doctor was out of the question. Mother-in-law, I don't mean to be forward, but he's not that extravagant. Our current lifestyle suits us well. I conveyed this casually, but my mother-in-law wouldn't budge. You're so annoying. Do you have any idea how hard he worked to get into medical school? We've been waiting to recoup his upbringing and tuition fees, and it's because of you that we're in this mess. Don't be ridiculous. My mother-in-law, increasingly heated, didn't stop searching my house. She rummaged through not just the kitchen but also every closet, discarding anything cheap. And then, unbelievably, she began to open the clear cases where we kept our utility bills, mail, and other paperwork. That's when she found the pay stubs. They were marked with $750 and $2.25. Despite my husband's name being clearly written on them, she either didn't notice or couldn't read the writing, and she screamed, $750? What do you mean, $750? You nurse, that's not my son's daily wage. Even anesthesiologists make $750 a day, and you're the wife of an internist making only $750. Are you slacking off at work or what? She began to go insane. That's why you're living in such poverty. You're a money sucker, huh? Barely working as a nurse and deceiving a doctor. You're just a part-time nurse because it sounds good. $750 is nothing, so quit already. That money was earned by him enduring younger doctors passing him by without even a glance, biting his lip and working in the gaps between his study hours for a very low daily wage. It was by no means the same with or without it. I thought it was a very pure number. But my mother-in-law's madness wouldn't stop, and finally, the worst happened. You're a poor, luck-bringing wife. Divorce quickly. At that moment, I heard the front door slam shut. My husband had returned home from his part-time job. His face froze when he saw his clothes and watch, which had been cruelly stuffed into a trash bag. He began to silently and carefully pick them up one by one. But my mother-in-law said this. John, I don't mean to be harsh, but please divorce this wife of yours. Why did you, with your high education, high income, and tall height of nearly 6 feet, choose such a pathetic woman? I'm so sad, and she only earned $750. My husband remained silent. I couldn't tell what he was thinking with his tightly pursed lips. My mother-in-law laughed and added, I'll bring the divorce papers for you. Leave this dusty room and this disinfectant-smelling woman behind and remarry a better woman. You're a doctor. Remarrying is a given. Then my husband slowly stood up and finally said, Mom, I've been keeping quiet about this, but I'm not a doctor yet. Huh? I'm sorry for hiding it, but I haven't passed the national exam yet. And about that $750. For some reason, my mother-in-law was so surprised that she turned to me for help. I don't understand what he's saying. The $750 payslip is yours, right? I decided there was no use hiding it anymore and replied, No, it's not mine. My husband chimed in. That's my salary for my part-time job. That can't be. You're lying, right? I'm not lying. It's true. I'm not a doctor yet. I failed the national exam twice. My mother-in-law, shocked to find out her son was not a doctor yet, suddenly started acting strangely. She slipped on some newspaper she had scattered earlier while rummaging through her house and fell to the floor. Help me. She slid and fell but managed not to hit her head by quickly putting her arm out. However, her right arm, the dominant one, broke with a loud snap. It was most definitely a fracture. My husband and I quickly treated her and took her to the hospital where we guided her to the orthopedic department. But my husband said, Mom, I'm sorry, but please don't come to our house anymore. And I don't want you to think of me as your son anymore. My mother-in-law was trembling from the shock of it all, but my husband continued. I knew you were bragging about me, but I put up with it. I felt guilty for lying. But when you insulted the money I worked so hard to earn, that was too much. But I never would have guessed you weren't a doctor. It doesn't matter if I'm a doctor or not. Do you think I'm studying just to say I earn $750 a day? I'm an adult, and it seems like we can't reconcile our differences in values, so let's cut ties. And so it seemed that my husband really decided to sever his ties with his mother. My mother-in-law, who had found her only purpose in life boasting about her son, seemed to be completely disheartened. Nowadays, she stays cooped up in her house, apparently too embarrassed to face her neighbors. That same year, my husband successfully passed the medical licensing exam. Though he was a bit older, he started working as a newly minted resident physician and shone brightly, never forgetting to show kindness, such as offering tea to the security guards. Our days became very peaceful and happy. If she had just waited a few more months, my mother-in-law's dream would have come true, and she could have seen him in his white coat. It's really a pity, but she brought it upon herself. You're always saying you're cold, so I set up a bonfire in the yard for you. Go warm yourself up there. Freezing from the cold, my mother-in-law pointed to the backyard visible from the window. Oh, what's that? I followed her pointing finger, and the sight made me collapse in despair. My name is Rosetta, a 27-year-old working housewife. I work part-time at a nearby supermarket. My husband, Andy, is an office worker and is 29, 2 years older than me. We have a 1-year-old son named Daniel. About a year before Daniel was born, we started living with Andy's family. Andy's father had passed away before our marriage, and since his mother was living alone, we decided to live together to save money for our child. From then on, the subtle jabs from my mother-in-law increased. After giving birth, I took a break from work to focus on Daniel, but she would say, I can take care of Daniel. Why don't you work outside? Isn't it normal for a daughter-in-law to work when living together? Yet you're so lazy living here. I had gained weight after Daniel's birth, and she would scold me, saying, you're getting fatter because you're lazy. So despite feeling unwell, I started working again. However, I wanted to take care of Daniel, so I didn't work full-time. But my mother-in-law would say, can't you work more? I explained, I could, but Daniel is still young, and I want to spend more time with him. Oh, are you saying you're not satisfied with me taking care of him? I raised Andy. I can raise a child better than you, who got sick right after giving birth. Just increase your work hours. I was overwhelmed by my mother-in-law's attitude, but I told Andy, she wants me to work more, but I don't want to reduce my time with Daniel. Can you talk to her? Mom knows better about raising kids. You're just working part-time, right? We're living here to save money, so just do as she says. Plus, you haven't lost your post-pregnancy weight. Andy mocked my weight and told me to work more. One day, my mother-in-law called my workplace and asked them to increase my hours. The part-time leader at the supermarket was her friend, so my hours were increased. I couldn't oppose the decision. When I got home, I had to cook for my mother-in-law and Andy, clean the house, and even clean up after my mother-in-law's tea parties with her friends. I hardly had time for Daniel. Leave Daniel to me. You should focus on work and house chores. You haven't lost any weight, have you? It's unsightly. My mother-in-law kept making such remarks. But when Daniel made a mess or cried at night, she'd say, you're his mother. Handle it. Can't you even discipline him properly? Don't neglect Daniel when he's in trouble, Mom, I said one day after cleaning the yard as my mother-in-law had instructed. Andy noticed me and said, why are you so dirty? Don't come into the house like that. I was cleaning the yard as mother-in-law told me. I do all the housework while she just holds Daniel all day and doesn't do any chores, I retorted, unable to hold back. Don't criticize Mom. You're not doing much either. Can you please go? Andy looked annoyed and pointed towards the other room without making eye contact with me. That was the moment I decided to divorce him. Most of my salary went to household expenses, but I started recording my mother-in-law and Andy's words on my phone and kept a diary of daily events. One winter day, I asked Andy for some money to buy winter clothes. Winter clothes? Wear what you wore before. You earn so little yet want luxuries. The old ones don't fit. I need new ones. You gained weight again. Unbelievable. Andy threw a $50 bill at me. This should be enough for a few clothes. Thanks. I knew $50 would only get me one piece of outerwear, but I was preparing for a divorce and waiting for the right moment to leave Andy's family home. So, I gratefully accepted the money and bought a down jacket on my way home from work. However, the next day, I faced a shocking situation. I couldn't find my new down jacket anywhere. I asked my mother-in-law, who was relaxing in the living room, have you seen my down jacket? Oh, I thought you didn't need it anymore, so I threw it away. What? I just bought it yesterday. Oh, did you? I put it in the shed outside. Go check. I rushed to the shed only to find the jacket mixed with the trash. I picked it up and tried to clean it outside in the freezing winter, but it still smelled. I knew if I brought it inside, my mother-in-law and Andy would complain, so I hand-washed it late at night. The next day, I realized my mother-in-law had done something even worse. I hung my still wet jacket out to dry on the balcony of my bedroom before going to work. When I returned home after work, I noticed that all the drawers on the shelf containing my clothes were empty. My clothes were all gone. I ran to my mother-in-law and asked, where are my clothes? You bought new ones, right? So I turned your old dirty clothes into rags. Now you can clean the house with them. I checked the cleaning closet and found rags made from my clothes. I also noticed my jacket, which was still drying outside, was gone. You're always saying you're cold, so I made a bonfire for you in the yard. Before I knew it, my mother-in-law was standing at the entrance to my bedroom, smiling slightly at me. When I checked the garden she had pointed to, I saw a fire being lit in the fire pit. I looked outside and saw my jacket's remains flying in the wind. You burned my clothes. How am I supposed to survive this winter? I exclaimed. You're chubby, so you'll be fine, my mother-in-law retorted, smirking as she walked away. Speechless and shaking with anger, I grabbed my diary and phone, wrapped Daniel in my only coat, and ran out of Andy's house in just a t-shirt. It was snowing heavily. A neighbor who didn't get along with my mother-in-law and had been worried about me since I moved in with Andy's family, found me and drove me to my parents' house an hour away. This neighbor had seen me lose weight and understood my situation despite Andy and his friends always telling me I was overweight. When I arrived, my mom panicked at my attire. "Why are you dressed like that? Is it hot in the car? Are you sick?" I had to run away from Andy's house. They turned all my clothes into rags and even burned my new jacket. I've been collecting evidence for a favorable divorce, but I felt my life was in danger, so I fled with Daniel wrapped in a coat. Daniel was peacefully asleep. I was so relieved that my mother-in-law didn't take him from me that I couldn't help but cry. Seeing my distress, my mother quickly contacted my father and a certain individual. The next day, responding to my mother's call, Andy's grandmother, whom I'll call Grandma, arrived at our home. It turns out my father and Andy's father were old friends, and Grandma and my dad still kept in touch. Andy and I met and married because of this connection. Before our marriage, Andy was genuinely kind and friendly to my parents, but over time, influenced by the constant harassment from his mother, he began to treat me coldly. When I explained everything with evidence, Grandma was even more furious than my parents. She immediately contacted a lawyer and arranged for my divorce. A few days later, after leaving Daniel with my sister who lives nearby, my parents' grandma, the lawyer, and I visited Andy's family home. As we arrived, my mother-in-law stormed out shouting, "Where's Daniel, you kidnappers?" But when Grandma stepped forward, she retorted, "Who are you calling a kidnapper, you money grubber?" Andy, who seemed to have taken time off work, joined us and we all sat down to discuss. "We're here to discuss Rosetta and Andy's divorce, custody of Daniel, and the sale of this property," the lawyer began. "What do you mean by selling the land? It's Dad's ancestral home, and Mom inherited it. You can't just sell it." Andy laughed mockingly at the lawyer's words. "The building might be inherited by Andy's mother, but the land belongs to Andy's father's family. We've been overlooking the unpaid land rent out of goodwill, but now we'll be claiming the overdue amount and selling the land," the lawyer explained, handing over a document detailing the unpaid rent for several years since Andy's father passed away. Seeing the amount, my mother-in-law exclaimed, "How can we pay this all of a sudden?" Grandma silenced her with a stern quiet. She continued, "We've been notifying you every month. You chose to ignore it, and more importantly, make amends for how you've treated Rosetta. Rosetta's accusations, she's my daughter-in-law. Why should it concern anyone else? Besides, Rosetta is probably just making things up. She always lied to get out of chores and work," my mother-in-law insisted, shouting at Grandma. "I've never lied. Just because you think I'm overweight, you've made me do all the work and chores, taking away my time with my child. Do you know how hard it was to be told to wear just a t-shirt in the depth of winter? You've been spreading these lies to everyone, claiming I'm eager to slack off," I said. The mother-in-law smirked, but when I played back the recorded snide remarks from her and Andy on my phone, she exclaimed, "That's fabricated." I then rushed to the closet, grabbed a rag made from my clothes, and slammed it on the table. "How do you explain this? My clothes have been turned into rags just like in the recording." "Rosetta, enough. Maybe Mom went a bit too far, but it's because you've always been lazy and just gaining weight. Reflect on your actions before blaming others," Andy said. "Excuse me, are you blind? Since coming here, I've lost at least 22 pounds. The reason my clothes don't fit isn't because I gained weight, but because I lost it so rapidly. Everyone but you and your mother is concerned about how thin I've become," I retorted. At my words, Andy seemed to realize for the first time how much weight I had lost. "I regret ever leaving Rosetta in your care," my father said, clenching his fists on his lap and glaring at Andy and the others. "I'm holding back my anger towards you right now, but I've mostly taken care of Daniel. Rosetta can't possibly handle him. We'll even go to court to ensure we live with Daniel." "That's fine, but courts usually favor the mother. And do you think they'll trust people who didn't even notice Rosetta's weight loss with Daniel? Can you afford a lawyer and court fees? I'll also claim alimony and land rent for this house." The lawyer calmly reiterated the situation. The mother-in-law seemed to realize they couldn't afford it. "This is so unfair." "Who's being unfair? You both bullied Rosetta and even tried to take Daniel away. Where did the money Rosetta earned go? Why did she flee to her parents' house in a t-shirt carrying Daniel in a snowstorm?" My usually silent father-in-law suddenly began to cry and loudly blamed the mother-in-law. "I'm truly sorry. We'll make sure to make amends for spoiling him and causing Rosetta such pain. Rama spoke to us, then Sigma the lawyer. Just pay what you owe. We'll cut all direct contact with you and inform our relatives. After that, I resigned from my part-time job, informing the headquarters about the mother-in-law's interference. The company apologized. While I never heard about any punishment for the mother-in-law's acquaintance, I was told that ensured no power imbalances among part-timers. A few weeks later, my divorce from Andy was finalized. I won custody of Daniel and received a fair amount of child support. The mother-in-law couldn't afford the land rent, so Andy had to cover it. But with the divorce settlement and child support, he struggled to pay. If he continues, they might have to vacate and demolish their house. Grandma joked, if the house is gone, the land will sell for more. Now I'm living with my parents, cherishing the time with Daniel. My father runs a company, and I plan to work there once Daniel is older. I'm using the divorce settlement to buy new clothes, enjoying coordinating outfits with Daniel. I look forward to spending even more time with him in the future. It's New Year's Day and our 6th wedding anniversary. For the first time, our family of 4 is visiting my husband Kevin's parents. It all started with just one word from Kevin. I want to settle things. I want you to come with me. Kevin, who usually wears a smile, had an unusually serious expression, likely due to nervousness. Of course, let's handle it properly, I said, consciously putting on a smile to help Kevin relax. Seeing me like that, Kevin smiled gently. Kevin's nervousness about returning to his hometown stemmed from the fact that this wouldn't be the usual Christmas scene. Normally, we would exchange Christmas gifts, our children would receive many presents, and as a couple, we would give many gifts to our relatives' children. But we knew that this year would be different because of Kevin's parents. It was evident that they were treating us terribly, and such mistreatment would likely be directed not only at us, but also at our 2 children. Thinking about it made my heart ache. Even so, someday we would have to face this situation. In that case, I decided to follow Kevin's lead. Kevin and I work as construction workers for the same company. I joined the company after graduating from middle school because I wanted to lessen the burden on my mom, who raised me and my 2 siblings by herself. Since I was in the 4th grade, I knew I wanted to help her as soon as possible. Even though girls don't usually work in the field, my mom, who I thought only worked as an office worker at the civil engineering company, was surprised when she learned I would be working as a laborer. She widened her eyes and said, "Sitting still at a desk and working is impossible for me. Going outside is much more enjoyable." Despite her concerns, I argued with the CEO about working in the field because the salary was good. My mom knew that once I made up my mind, I wouldn't listen to anyone, so she didn't say anything more. On my first day at the company, when I was called by the site supervisor and stood in front of the workers, everyone was taken aback. It's not every day you see a girl fresh out of middle school working alongside burly men. Sensing the atmosphere, I said, "My name is Mary. Feel free to train me rigorously. No need for any special treatment." Everyone had a bewildered expression on their faces, like pigeons that had just eaten a pea shooter. It was a moment of realization for me. One man let out an incredibly loud shout, "Kevin, you've only been here for a month, so you shouldn't be saying that then." The room filled with laughter, and it became the signal to start the day's work. Although I had asked not to be treated specially, all the workers were kind and helped me get used to the work quickly. One person who especially looked out for me was Kevin, who had raised his voice on my first day, saying, "Leave it to me." Kevin, who is 3 years older than me, served as the site's mood maker. During busy times when tensions ran high, he always helped lighten the mood. He patiently taught me the basics of the job and always lent a hand during physically demanding tasks. I gradually found myself drawn to Kevin, who never neglected the people around him and always showed consideration. About half a year into my job, one day Kevin was tasked with moving materials, and I ended up riding in the same vehicle with him. I had started to become curious about Kevin and felt excited throughout the entire car ride, unable to say anything. An awkward atmosphere filled the car. "Why did you join this company, Kevin?" Feeling the need to say something, I asked a trivial question. At that moment, Kevin decided to share something personal. "I wanted to become free sooner, you know." I was taken aback by the sudden heavy statement. "I'm sorry," I said, thinking I had asked something I shouldn't have. Kevin quickly returned to his usual cheerful self and said, "Mary, there's no reason for you to have such a gloomy expression. I'm confident that my judgment was correct." Hearing those words, I felt a deep admiration for Kevin. In the next moment, my true feelings slipped out. Would you like to go out with me? I didn't even know why those words came out of my mouth. Suddenly feeling embarrassed, I looked down. Nice to see you, Kevin said when the car stopped at a red light. I lifted my head and looked at Kevin. He directed a kind gaze towards me. Shortly after we started dating, I learned the meaning of what Kevin had said in the car on the day of the material delivery. When he mentioned wanting to be free as soon as possible, I discovered that Kevin had a 2-year age difference with his brother Sam. Sam had been academically excellent since childhood with outstanding school grades. On the other hand, Kevin didn't have good grades, although they were still above average. But his parents didn't accept that. Kevin explained that he always felt uncomfortable being compared to Sam. That alone was difficult enough. But Kevin's parents poured all their love into Sam. Sam went to one of the top public middle schools in the county, while Kevin attended the local public middle school. During that time, all of their parents' attention seemed to be focused on Sam, leaving Kevin without any communication or support. When Kevin entered high school, he began thinking about moving away from his parents once he graduated. The day after his high school graduation, Kevin left home without revealing his destination. I'm leaving this house starting tomorrow, Kevin said during dinner. His mother simply replied, Is that so, while his father remained silent. Sam, Kevin's brother, wasn't there because he had entered an extremely competitive public university. We got married when I was 20 and Kevin was 24. We invited my family, colleagues from work, and close friends to the wedding. At Kevin's request, we didn't inform his family. I want to be genuinely blessed from the bottom of my heart, Kevin had said, and I understood that it was his true feeling, not just a show of strength. So I didn't argue. The following year, our first son Jack was born, and in the 3rd year of our marriage, our daughter Sarah was born. We were never wealthy, but being part of a smiling family made me happy. As far as I knew, Kevin was not in contact with his family at all. However, Kevin said that he would return to his parents' house next New Year. Just be yourself, he said, but I knew it wouldn't be easy to act normally. I wondered what kind of expression I'd see from Kevin's parents and how Kevin would interact with them and Sam. Would he have to endure painful experiences like he did in high school again? I spent anxious days thinking about various things until we went back to his hometown. For Kevin, it had been 6 years since he last visited his home. Waiting to greet us were 2 children. Mom, Dad, who are these people? The older boy asked before running into the house. After a while, a woman with a neat appearance, around 50 years old with long hair, appeared. This was likely Kevin's mother. Long time no see, Kevin greeted her. It's been a while, she responded coldly. Her attitude made it clear that we were not welcomed. In the living room, Kevin's father and Sam's spouse were there. The conversation flowed fairly well, but it revolved around matters related to Sam, who worked at a city bank, his children's extracurricular activities, and their upcoming exams. It was a clear attempt to provoke us. Our 2 kids stuck close to my side, sensing the tension. Kevin's mother reappeared in the living room with a cheerful smile and handed a small envelope to Sam's children. Their faces lit up with joy, showing how much she doted on them. Then she turned her gaze towards us and said, We will not give any New Year's gift to the children of a high school dropout's wife. Her words stung deeply. I clenched my fist firmly on my thigh, enduring it. Kevin had told me to endure whatever they said, and I was determined to follow his advice. My 2 children were also enduring in the same way. There was a brief moment of silence. Then Kevin spoke, It's not a big deal. Meeting with you guys for the last time this year, we won't see each other again after this. His words were heavy, yet he spoke in a bright tone. They must have been surprised by Kevin's reaction. I had never expected this reaction. Kevin's parents and Sam just said, Huh? And then froze. Mary, is it about time for the CEO to arrive? Kevin asked me. The clock read almost 5 minutes to 11. Yeah, that's right. They said they'd arrive around 11, I replied. During our conversation, Kevin's parents listened with blank expressions. Around 11:10, the doorbell rang. Kevin's mother answered it, and a voice said, I'm Smith. With a curious expression, Kevin's mother headed towards the entrance. When she came back, she had a complex expression. Behind her was the CEO of our company, standing with a calm demeanor. I'm sorry for the unexpected visit during the New Year holiday, the CEO began. Kevin from my family said today would be a good day to talk. Kevin's parents and Sam had expressions of confusion. Mr. Smith, we finished our discussion. I'll take on the matter of adoption, Kevin spoke clearly, ensuring his parents and Sam understood. The sudden mention of adoption left Kevin's parents even more taken aback. Did you really explain the situation properly? You have a habit of making judgments based on your own assumptions from time to time, the CEO said, demonstrating his understanding of Kevin's personality. My parents have been talking as if we weren't there at all. Their attitude clearly indicates how they feel about us, Kevin said. The CEO turned to Kevin's parents, straightened his posture, and said, I am considering adopting Kevin, and I have his consent for it. However, I believe it's essential to have a proper discussion with both of you. That's why I came to pay my respects today. While the CEO explained, Kevin's parents and Sam remained silent. They probably couldn't say anything because they were hearing about how great a person Kevin is and how dedicated he is in everything he does. The CEO had broached the topic of adoption about 6 months ago. He and his wife didn't have any children and wanted Kevin to eventually take over the company. I'm not cut out for that, Kevin initially declined, but the CEO smiled and said, Can you really say something like that? Everyone except you supported the idea of adopting Kevin into the family. Upon hearing those words, Kevin broke down in tears. When I realized how many people truly saw and accepted him, I felt incredibly blessed. When the CEO told me about Kevin's adoption proposal, Kevin, sitting next to me, explained it with a hint of embarrassment. Kevin gave us an experience as if he were our own child. He fulfilled the dream of walking down the aisle with a bride's hand I thought would never be mine, the CEO said, looking at me. He was probably referring to how he went with me to Kevin's place instead of my father at our wedding. Even after the CEO's explanation about the adoption, Kevin's parents said nothing. Goodbye, Kevin said, likely a final farewell to his parents and Sam. I beg your pardon, the CEO added. We got up and headed to the front door. For some reason, everyone saw us off. Kevin's parents and Sam both had faces like they couldn't accept reality, as if they had been caught by a fox. Wow, that's a cool car, Sam's children exclaimed in amazement as they saw the CEO's car. Our family got into the car, and I rolled down the window to give a nod. Kevin's parents and Sam's group had blank, ashen faces. As the car started moving, Kevin said, Dad, I'm counting on you from now on. I'd appreciate you, I added. Then our two children, though a bit hesitant, spoke in clear voices, Grandpa, I'm counting on you. Don't you dare come back if you can't even do basic housework. My mother-in-law spat at me and raged while I was hospitalized due to a broken leg. The irony was that she was the cause of my injury, yet instead of apologizing, she was trying to throw me out of the house. Pushed to my limits, I smiled and responded, Oh, I'd be delighted to do that, ma'am. A few days later, my husband confronted her. Do you have any idea, Mom? Did you not know about Emily? Upon hearing the truth revealed by my husband, my mother-in-law turned as pale as a ghost. My name is Emily Johnson. 3 years ago, I married Alex, whom I met through a mutual acquaintance. Alex's family runs a diner managed primarily by his mother. His father passed away early, and his mother single-handedly raised him, which I'm sure was a tough journey. Initially, I deeply respected my mother-in-law, but that didn't last long. Even after getting married, because Alex wanted me to continue working, I didn't quit my job. Alex, as the second-generation owner of the diner, was running the business alongside his mother. However, my mother-in-law disliked that I didn't help around their house. A woman who doesn't even help with house chores, even if you're working outside, we all know a woman's salary isn't much. She'd grumble every day. Soon, her constant complaining escalated to harassment. You don't do chores at all, she'd complain, and when I managed to squeeze in some time for house chores, she'd criticize, You're not doing it properly at all. Do you even care? Even though I thought I was doing a decent job, it was never good enough for her. She'd berate me, calling me a useless wife who can't do housework, and at times she would lecture me for hours. Her harassment intensified, and my stress kept building up. When I tried talking to Alex about it, he said, It's between you two, right? Don't drag me into this, staying out of it. Then one day, an incident broke out. The diner was closed that day, and my mother-in-law left early in the morning to go somewhere. As evening came, I received a sudden call demanding me to come and get her. The call ended abruptly before I could even refuse, leaving me with no choice but to reluctantly head to the train station. When I finally reached the station, she did nothing but complain all the way home. accusing me of being late and complaining about the heating system. It was nothing new, so I just nodded and shrugged it off. But I guess that got on her nerves. What kind of attitude is that? Don't you think it's disrespectful to your mother-in-law? In a fit of rage, she raised her hand against me even though I was driving. Ouch, stop it, I'm driving, you know. Quiet, don't you dare talk back to me. My pleas fell on deaf ears as she was blinded by anger. Not satisfied with her slaps, she tried to kick me hard, but her foot hit the steering wheel. The next thing I knew, I was in a hospital bed. Where am I? I asked the nurse who was changing my IV drip. Apparently, I had been brought to the hospital after a car accident. I had broken my right leg and suffered cuts and bruises all over my body. How's my mother-in-law? She's only got some scratches. There were no other injured persons. The nurse's words relieved me a bit. However, when my mother-in-law came to my room, she started yelling. It's all your fault that I got injured. You need to pay me compensation. She screeched at me the moment she saw me. Where did you get injured? I asked. Right here, she said, rolling up her sleeve to reveal a small piece of gauze. On the other hand, I was confined to my bed, unable to even get up. The accident was her fault. Out of nowhere, she lost her temper and hit me while I was driving, leading to the wreck. But there wasn't a single word of apology from her. Far from it. On top of being good for nothing, you want to be a nuisance to your own mother-in-law. You're nothing but a god of pestilence. I never liked you from the start. Don't you dare come back if you can't even do basic housework. The moment I heard those words, I felt something snap inside me. Oh, I'd be delighted to do that, ma'am. The words slipped from my mouth before I even knew it. My mother-in-law just stood there with a stunned look on her face. I won't be returning to your house. I'm going to divorce Alex. Thank you for everything until now, I said, bowing slightly. My mother-in-law was jolted back to reality. Oh, how unusual for you to listen for once. Yes, just as you say, I'm useless and worthless. I don't belong in your house, I said, pretending to be downcast. My mother-in-law left the hospital room saying, oh, I see, unable to say anything further. Even after that, my mother-in-law kept coming to my hospital room and complaining, you'll end up on the streets if you can't come back to our house. It'll be too late to regret it then. Yes, you're right. It would have been better if you had done this sooner. You're absolutely right. Are you listening? While my mother-in-law kept complaining, I was casually ignoring her and sitting on my phone. This happened several times. A week after I was admitted to the hospital, my mother-in-law came to my room to complain as usual. Just as I was ignoring her as usual, my pale-faced husband Alex burst in. Oh, it's unusual for you to visit. What changed your mind? What on earth is this? Alex asked, holding a divorce paper with my details already filled in. Oh, Dad, I asked my family to mail it. I'm glad it arrived just fine, I replied. Why all of a sudden? Alex asked. I relayed to my husband what my mother-in-law had told me. And to think, Mom, did you not know Emily earns way more than I do? My husband turned pale as he asked this in a shaky voice. Yes, I've been working for a large corporation since before we got married. I've diligently worked and achieved decent results, I explained. So I hold a fairly high position now. My salary reflects the toughness of the job and is, as my husband put it, quite substantial. But she doesn't look like she earns that much, does she? She always wears the same sort of clothes. My mother-in-law interjected. That's because Emily has been spending her money on our diner, Alex explained. This was true. The diner my mother-in-law runs was on the brink of bankruptcy. It was in a tight spot when my husband took it over, as my mother-in-law had no business acumen. My husband was trying to turn it around, and I've been using my salary to keep the diner afloat, and have given a lot of advice about its management. We managed to escape the worst situation, but without my salary, the diner would probably go out of business soon. No, it can't be true. There's no way that useless woman could do such a thing, my mother-in-law said, flustered and unable to believe what she was hearing. I showed her my phone, which I had been using until just a moment ago. What is this? It's the data recording of your diner's performance, and this here is my pay stub. My workplace has digitized our pay slips. My mother-in-law stared at my phone and slowly turned pale. No, that can't be. Also, I should mention that I've already consulted with the police about the accident you caused. What? My mother-in-law's expression was utterly shocked. I sighed in exasperation. Since an accident occurred, of course the police will conduct an inquiry, right? So I've reported everything exactly as it happened to the police. I've also submitted the dash cam footage. Why? Why would you do that? From your reaction, it seems you're aware you caused the accident, aren't you? There's a chance you could be held criminally liable, but if you admit it, you might get off with a lighter sentence. After a while, my mother-in-law started trembling, and then to my surprise, she knelt before me. I'm sorry. I had no idea we were living off your money. I'm sorry about the accident too. I'm reflecting on my actions. Please forgive me. My mother-in-law's sudden change in attitude was astonishing. Until now, she never uttered an apology. Is it that easy to say sorry if it means she gets off the hook? I thought, feeling more disgusted than angry. Emily, Mom's really sorry. You'll forgive her, right? Alex said, near tears, as he laid his hand on my mother-in-law's back. She looked up at him with tearful eyes, and he nodded back reassuringly. Watching them trying to garner sympathy, I felt nothing but cold resolve. What are you saying? I will never forgive you guys, I stated firmly. Huh? Alex looked taken aback. Isn't it obvious? Actually, I intended to divorce you even before this mess with your mom. Even when I was seriously injured and hospitalized, you never visited me. You spent my salary without a shred of gratitude. I've been fed up with you for a while now. What? Alex's face fell. There's no benefit for me in staying married to you. In fact, you're only bringing me down. That's why I'm divorcing you. I smiled brightly in stark contrast to Alex and my mother-in-law, whose faces were filled with despair. There was some fuss afterward with Alex throwing a tantrum, but once I mentioned getting a lawyer involved, he quickly signed the divorce papers. He should have just signed them without making such a fuss. I thought I couldn't be more disappointed in him, but the regret of marrying him cut deep. Once they lost my support, their family diner quickly faced operational issues. It shut down in no time, leaving Alex and my mother-in-law in a poor state. My mother-in-law had said she would be left out on the streets, and that's exactly what happened. But it seems they were the ones in that predicament. They sold off the diner for peanuts and moved to a rundown apartment. Having no work experience outside the diner, they could only find low-paying jobs, barely making ends meet. By the way, it turned out that my mother-in-law had lied about losing her husband at a young age. She was quite a player, and her fed-up husband had filed for divorce and left her. Even on the day of the accident, she was out gallivanting with a man. I found out these details from a police officer who was investigating the accident. I have nothing but gratitude for the police who kept up the investigation. My mother-in-law will probably be charged with some crime at some point. Already living a miserable life, if they end up in police custody, they would surely face ruin. Perhaps sensing this, I received a plea for reconciliation from my ex-husband after our divorce. If you continue to bother me, I'll have the cops come for you and your mother, I threatened him. He never showed up in front of me again. The divorce went through smoothly, and I cut ties with my in-laws. My broken bone healed after treatment. Currently, I'm working hard while still recovering from my injury. I had been using my salary for my in-laws' diner before, so I had almost no money left for myself. But it's different now. Working for myself and being able to spend money only on myself, I had no idea how much happiness this would bring. I'm thinking of valuing myself more, and if I can find a partner who values me, I'm considering getting remarried. My name is Jennifer, and I'm married to Robert. Robert has a younger brother named James, who is 3 years younger than him. The woman James brought home as his future wife turned out to be quite a surprise. Hey, I'm getting married, James announced, looking genuinely happy as he introduced us to his fiancée. Hi, I'm Elizabeth. Nice to meet you. Elizabeth was a flashy dresser, decked out in designer brands. Her bold makeup and nails made her a little intimidating at first glance. But after talking to her, we found her to be outgoing and charming. We were genuinely happy for James and his upcoming marriage. Robert's parents had both passed away, his mom when he was in 7th grade and his dad 2 years ago. So neither Robert nor James had parents anymore. I bet Mom and Dad are celebrating your news up in heaven, Robert said. Look, I've been depending on you for so long, Robert. I don't expect that to change once we're married, James added. Don't say that, or I'll be taking care of you forever, Robert replied, both of them laughing joyfully. They had always been close brothers who discussed anything and everything. So where are you guys planning to live after getting married? I asked, still absorbing the sudden engagement news. We're thinking of building our own place. The thing is, I travel a lot for work, so we're still undecided on where to build, James answered. Because of his frequent work travel, he had a tough time deciding where to live. We don't have reliable parents to lean on. If we live near each other, we can help one another if something happens. I agreed. My parents live far away, and Elizabeth seemed to have no parents around either. That sounds like a good plan. Yeah, but properties around here are expensive. We're not rich like Robert, so it's a tough call, James said. The idea to live nearby was a casual suggestion, but they took it seriously and moved into a house relatively close to us. After they settled in, we frequently had barbecues and drank together. It was a good time. Months later, they were blessed with a baby on the way, but tragedy struck on his usual trip back from work. James fell asleep at the wheel and passed away. Robert was consumed by grief over the sudden loss of his beloved brother. Elizabeth, on the other hand, didn't seem that devastated. Normally, you'd be distraught, especially with a baby coming, but not her. She did cry, but it looked fake, making me wonder. Feeling uneasy, I reached out to her. If you need anything after the baby comes, you can always rely on us. We'll support you in any way we can. Thank you, she said. That was the last we saw of Elizabeth. Months later, we received a birth announcement from her and went to visit. But she said she was too busy to invite us in, so we left the gift at the door and went back home. It was crazy that we couldn't even see the baby when we came to visit. Our distrust toward Elizabeth only grew after that. It felt like she was avoiding us. Anytime we reached out, she claimed she was too busy to meet. Before we knew it, a year had passed since James' death. Then, out of the blue, Elizabeth showed up at our house. It's been a while, Jennifer, she said. Long time no see. How have you been? What brings you here all of a sudden? I asked. I came because I need some advice. Is Emily not with you? Emily's at preschool. Being alone at home with her all the time was driving me crazy, so I enrolled her right after she was born. Oh, I see. Are you working then? Working? No way. Okay, good on you for managing preschool then. I got her in because I was diagnosed with depression after my husband's death. I got a doctor's note and everything. Wow, didn't know that was an option. Anyway, what's the advice you need? Elizabeth's next statement left me shocked. Would you mind paying our property taxes? What? Property taxes? Where is this coming from? We don't have money to pay your property taxes. Why would you think we would? You said we could ask you for anything, didn't you? Well, yes, but... Plus, you guys were the ones who insisted we live on that land. We never insisted. Regardless, property taxes for that land are higher than in other places, and it's really causing us problems. Why don't you just work a bit and pay it yourself? I can't work. I've even got Emily in preschool based on the excuse that I can't work due to mental illness. That's not our problem. Please, if we can't pay the property tax, we won't be able to live in that house. Look, I don't know all the details, so I'll discuss it with Robert when he gets home. Please do, she said. After showing up out of the blue and making such an unexpected request, Elizabeth left. When Robert got home, I told him about Elizabeth's sudden visit and her asking us to pay the property taxes. Of course, Robert was surprised, but he was also angered by her audacity. A few weeks later, we invited Elizabeth over to our house to discuss something important. We timed it so that her daughter, Emily, was at preschool, allowing the three of us to talk. Elizabeth arrived in a good mood, probably thinking we were going to help her with the property taxes. Robert, it's been a while. Elizabeth greeted him. You seem well. I heard from Jennifer, but let's hear it from you. What did you want to talk about? Robert asked. Well, I hate to be a bother, but I came to ask for help with the property taxes, she admitted. Why can't you pay them yourself? Is there a reason? I'm still dealing with emotional stress and can't work. With a young child, I just don't have the money for the taxes. So you can't handle unexpected expenses. Exactly. The property taxes are way too high. After all, it was you guys who decided we should buy that house on that land, so it's your responsibility to help us out, Elizabeth said, frustration evident in her voice. Why don't you have the money in the first place? Robert asked. I'm a single mom. It's tough. Survivor's benefits alone don't cut it. I'm barely making ends meet and can't handle sudden expenses like taxes. You're lying about not having money, Robert retorted. I'm not. I lost a breadwinning husband. Are you out of touch with reality? You think I don't know anything? Robert said, something rather cryptic. Hearing those words, Elizabeth's expression changed slightly. Whoa, you're scaring me, Robert. You're getting more than just survivor benefits, aren't you? What are you talking about? That's all I get. She defended herself. It's pointless to lie. I know everything. You're getting money from life insurance, too. Elizabeth remained silent. My brother had life insurance, you know. He was insured for about $1,000 a month until he was 60. So what? As his wife, it's my right to receive that money. You have no right to question me. But you do get a good amount of money every month with survivor's benefits and the insurance money, don't you? It's still not enough for everyday living. We have a mortgage. You've paid off the mortgage, haven't you? Don't you also get various other forms of assistance? How do you know all this? My brother consulted with me about everything, especially financial matters. So I know it all. I see, but like I said before, I'm his wife and Emily is his daughter. How we use that money is none of your business. Fair point, but since money is coming in, you should manage it properly and pay your own taxes. Robert, you work for a big corporation, and you're rich. Why can't you just help us have a little? You're being too stingy. Elizabeth still seemed unconvinced. Listening to this conversation, I finally understood why Elizabeth, even after losing her husband, continued to live lavishly without working. I couldn't complain. That money was something her late husband left for her. But Robert wasn't done talking. That's when I came to know an unbelievable fact. So earlier, you said the kid is James's. Is that true? Robert asked. What? What are you talking about? Of course it is, Elizabeth snapped. Well, that's good because if it's not, we have a big problem. Isn't that quite rude? I just lost my husband. Don't start accusing me of things. I, who had been silently listening, quickly interjected. That's crossing the line, man. But Robert continued, you see, my brother consulted me when he found out about their pregnancy. What about? Elizabeth asked, her tone defiant. He said that judging by the due date, there's no way the child could be his. What do you mean? He was always on an extended business trip and hadn't been home during that time. He was worried that the child might not be his. That's absurd. I thought so too initially. James said there was no evidence of an affair. Then he passed away before we could gather any. So it was a misunderstanding, right? After James was gone, I couldn't shake off the thought, so I investigated. Investigated what? Whether you had been unfaithful, Elizabeth. My jaw dropped in shock from this new information. Robert continued speaking to Elizabeth. I was planning to take my time gathering evidence, but since you came to our home, I hurried my investigation. And what did you find? You're living with another man now, aren't you? So what if I am? He's someone I started seeing after my husband passed. I see. I was wondering if the man you're living with is the child's father, but it turns out he's not. Emily's father is my brother. Do you have any proof? Sorry to say, I approached Emily and the man at the park and got a single hair strand from their clothing. That's creepy. I do feel a bit guilty, but it's for my brother, Robert said. And what did you do with it? James is no longer with us, so I submitted the hair along with mine for a DNA test. According to Robert, even if it's not from the father, a close relative can provide enough genetic information for a paternity test, I explained. Robert continued, the test showed that Emily is not James's child, Elizabeth. Elizabeth looked down, unable to speak. Then she finally spoke, almost in a whisper. So what does that mean? It's heartbreaking for James. Speaking ill of the dead accomplishes nothing, Robert replied. Maybe, but since my brother can't find justice, I plan to file a lawsuit against you and your lover for damages. What? What are you talking about? We're getting married soon. Oh, really? Well, that makes things easier. What does? Since the house is already paid off, you should just sell it. Then you can use that money to pay for both your compensations. Why should I? If you can afford the compensation, you're welcome to stay, but your fiancé doesn't work, right? How do you know that? You can get by without working now, but that changes when you're married. It's none of your business. The conversation was far from over, and an angry Elizabeth tried to leave. Robert spoke up. I'll handle the property taxes for you. I'll also start the process for selling the house. Angry, Elizabeth stormed off. She eventually sold the house just as Robert suggested. The house sold quickly due to its desirable location and being relatively new. Elizabeth paid the compensation with the money from the sale. Apparently, Elizabeth and her man got married, but because of that, she would no longer receive the survivor's benefits she had been getting due to her husband's passing. Ignorant Elizabeth had no clue about this. She bought a cheap used house with the money from the sale. No longer a single mom, her financial aid dried up, as did the survivor's benefits. Both Elizabeth and her new husband had to start working. Elizabeth had been a spender on fashion and beauty, but her marriage marked the start of a tougher life. Her husband couldn't keep a job, and the marriage soon fell apart. Elizabeth was back to being a single mom, but now with no financial aid coming in. She has to work desperately to make ends meet. For us, the storm has passed, and our peaceful days have returned. We were even blessed with a child we had longed for. I can't wait to meet the child that I will have with my beloved Robert. We will give our child the middle name of my late brother-in-law, ensuring that his memory will always be with us. Where's the ATM card? Let me handle it, Donald said to me as I lay in my hospital bed, battling cancer. He had a triumphant smirk on his face, clearly plotting something sinister now that he had the card. Just so you know, there's $500,000 in there. Handle it well, I told him. It wasn't just because we were married and I trusted him. I had a plan, a thorough scheme to bring Donald down. When I returned home to grab a few things, I found a divorce application on the table. As expected, the ATM card was gone. Operation successful. To anyone else, it would seem like a hopeless situation, but this was just the beginning of my revenge. I'm Emily, a housewife in my 40s, living with my husband Donald. Initially, our marriage was problem-free, but now our relationship has completely soured. The main reason? Donald's true nature. Donald was deceptive, pretending to be a kind and caring husband for the first 2 months of our marriage. However, after those 2 months, he showed his true colors. He believed that a wife should always prioritize her husband, underpinning his terrible personality. I was constantly subjected to his harsh words. A wife is supposed to be subordinate to her husband. You should always listen to what your husband says. That was Donald's mantra. If I ever failed to fulfill his whims, he would hurl cruel words at me regularly. Aren't you capable of listening to your husband? You're a failure as a wife. For instance, he insisted on washing his clothes first, then mine, despite it being more economical to wash everything together. Donald stubbornly refused. Don't you dare wash my clothes with yours. What if they start to smell like yours? As if my laundry was somehow foul. His attitude extended to cleaning as well. His room always had to be cleaned first and kept spotless. If a single speck of dust was found, he would demand, "There's dust in my room. Clean it now," ordering me to vacuum and mop. When it came to meals, if I served something Donald disliked, he absolutely wouldn't eat it. It would have been manageable if it was just about knowing his likes and dislikes, but Donald was capricious. Even his favorite dishes were rejected if he wasn't in the mood. A wife's job is to always serve what her husband wants to eat. Failing that, you're not fit to be a wife. That was Donald's reasoning, but it was unreasonable. Yes, I am Donald's wife, but that doesn't make me omniscient or capable of reading his mind. If he didn't want to eat something because he wasn't in the mood, he could have just told me beforehand what he wanted. But Donald never did that, making it even harder to cater to his whims. I was honestly fed up with his childlike tantrums. It was unbearable, and I knew I couldn't possibly fulfill all his whims. However, each time I made a mistake, the atmosphere at home worsened, and our relationship deteriorated. So I couldn't completely ignore his demands either. Such a forced lifestyle was bound to take its toll eventually. While doing household chores, I lost consciousness. It seems I made a loud noise when I collapsed, and a concerned neighbor contacted the building manager, who found me and called an ambulance. Taken to the hospital and regaining consciousness, I was immediately admitted for tests. My wishful thinking, "I hope they don't find anything wrong," was shattered. I had developed cancer. Whether it was due to the illness or not, I experienced dizziness severe enough that I couldn't stand. A nurse supported me as I had to sit down suddenly. The doctor then advised contacting family members. I called my parents home, of course, but I had lost Mom a few years ago, and Dad was in a state requiring care, living with my brother and his wife in a place 3 hours away by plane, making it impossible for them to come quickly. I contacted Donald but only got his voicemail. I left a message, but he didn't even read it. He had turned off notifications for messages from me, so he would likely notice it quite late. I could have gone myself, but the doctor advised against it, so I gave up on that idea. A few hours later, Donald finally contacted me. "I'll come to the hospital tomorrow. Wait for me." That was the entirety of his brief message, no concern for my condition. Nothing. I wasn't even sure if he would really bring my belongings. His indifference felt like a weight on my body. First of all, I had explicitly asked Donald to bring my belongings today. I needed a change of clothes and various necessities like toiletries left at home. Despite repeatedly messaging this to Donald, there was no response. After a few hours of distress, Donald finally read the message and bluntly replied, "Shut up and be quiet." Considering I was hospitalized for cancer and this was an emergency, his attitude was shockingly disappointing. Not that I had much hope in Donald to begin with. Ultimately, he didn't come to the hospital that day. I had tried to be realistic, but part of me couldn't let go of hope, making my first day in the hospital even more difficult. The nurses sympathized with me, which only added to my pain. The next day around noon, just as promised, Donald showed up. Seeing me, he casually remarked, "You look healthier than I thought. I expected you to be more frail." His comment was infuriating. "Just put down the bags and leave," I said angrily. Tilting his head, Donald responded, "I didn't bring any bags." What was he here for then? Wasn't he supposed to bring my things? Unable to contain my anger, I glared at him. "What's that look for?" He seemed annoyed by this and glared back. His unreasonable behavior was too much, but I tried to stay calm. "Then why are you here if he didn't bring my things?" "There's no point," I asked in an angry tone. "I had another errand," he replied. Confused, I asked, "Another errand? What is it?" Donald hesitated as if he had something to say. "If you have something to say it now," I pressed him, impatient and sleep-deprived from anxiety. Finally, with a laugh, he said, "Where's the ATM card? Let me manage it. Trust me." Donald had come to find out where the ATM card was to seize our savings for his own use. At his self-centeredness, even in this situation, I couldn't help but sigh deeply. Yet Donald seemed unfazed, smiling as if nothing mattered. I couldn't deal with him anymore, so I decided to act. "There's $500,000, so please take care of it," I said. $500,000, Donald exclaimed in a mix of surprise and delight. For context, Donald was just an ordinary office worker, and so was I before marriage. We never did any job that could earn a fortune. So where did this wealth come from? The answer: stocks. I started investing after becoming a housewife, as suggested by a friend. While juggling household responsibilities, I had recently made a fortune in the stock market. However, I had no intention of spending such a large sum immediately and decided to save it for the future. Ideally, I would have kept the existence of this $500,000 secret, fearing Donald's selfish actions if he knew about it. But now, fueled by a desire for revenge, I needed to trap Donald, who had repeatedly behaved selfishly. Donald was surprised, even flustered, by the higher-than-expected amount. Smiling gently at him, I said, "The ATM card is in the third drawer of the shelf. You'll manage it, right?" Seemingly dumbstruck until now, Donald replied energetically, "Understood." It seemed he had fallen for the trap perfectly. "I'll leave the rest to you," he said, leaving the room briskly. He probably planned to get the ATM card and withdraw the $500,000, unaware of the obvious trap. Donald seemed to believe everything was going according to his plan, but it wasn't that easy. Fortunately, today was a holiday and the bank's counters were closed. With Donald at work tomorrow, he probably wouldn't be able to withdraw the money until the evening. That gave me enough time to execute my revenge plan. After discussing it with my doctor, I was granted permission to leave the hospital for a short time. Tomorrow my revenge would take place, and I couldn't wait. The next day, as planned, I decided to return home to fetch my belongings. This was merely a pretext to get permission to leave. My real goal lay elsewhere. Despite it being only a day, I missed my home terribly. Donald was at work, so the house was empty. Upon entering, I saw two papers on the living room table, a divorce application and a letter. "Sorry for the rush, but let's get divorced. Please write and submit the divorce application." That was the content of the letter. Out of caution, I checked the shelf and found the ATM card gone, quickly realizing Donald had taken it. Normally, one might feel dismayed at such a large sum of money being stolen, but I remained smiling. Operation successful. I couldn't help but let those words slip out. If Donald had been there, he would have been furious, wondering what I meant. First, I filled out the divorce application, then gathered the essentials I needed for my hospital stay, and left the house I had shared with Donald for so many years. Of course, I submitted the divorce application on my way, severing all ties with him. Back at the hospital, I prepared for the battle ahead, discussing various matters. Later, relaxing in the hospital, I noticed several missed calls on my phone, all from Donald. He had also sent messages asking the same thing, tell me how to withdraw the money. It was something along those lines. Noticing that I had read the messages, my phone rang again. Not wanting to disturb my roommate, I moved to the common area where phone calls were permitted and called back. Emily, finally, I can't withdraw the money. Please tell me how to do it. Donald's voice was more frantic than I imagined. He probably needed the $500,000 immediately for some reason. I felt no obligation to help him. If you can't withdraw it, just give up, I replied coldly. Don't be so harsh. We were husband and wife after all. Maybe we should help each other out, Donald pleaded. What nonsense. Donald's actions were nothing noble. He was trying to betray me to satisfy his greed, nothing more. There was no way I would respond to Donald's feelings. Are you having trouble withdrawing the money? I asked. Yes, I urgently need the $500,000. Please help me, Donald responded. It seemed he was in a situation where he urgently needed the money. Despite having the ATM card for the account holding the $500,000, he couldn't withdraw the funds. Thinking he might be doing something wrong, he contacted me for instructions. As I listened to Donald's explanation, he begged, please help me. His voice was weaker than I had ever heard, clearly desperate. The thought of him being so cornered almost made me laugh. I decided to confront Donald with the harsh reality. The method is correct, but the ATM card you have now won't work anymore. What do you mean? Donald's voice rose in disbelief. It's true an ATM card should work, but the one you have is now useless. Why? Because I filed a theft report earlier today. That ATM card is just a piece of paper now. It's useless to you. There was silence on Donald's end, probably in shock. I had stopped by the bank on my way back and reported the card stolen. Donald had taken my ATM card without permission, intending to claim the $500,000 I had earned for himself. His act was clearly theft, and it was only right that I took appropriate measures. The ATM card Donald took could no longer access the $500,000. Moreover, our marriage was over. He couldn't use the excuse of being a spouse. Donald had himself eliminated the means to access the money. How does it feel to be tricked by the woman you look down upon? I don't know what you wanted the $500,000 for, but I'm not foolish enough to hand over such an amount under these circumstances. Stop insulting me. I need the $500,000 right now. Please, I'll do anything. Just give me the money, Donald pleaded. His desperation was evident, but I couldn't think of any reason why he would suddenly need $500,000. Why do you suddenly need $500,000? What have you done? I asked, feeling a sense of ominous unease. Donald began to explain. 2 days ago, learning about the $500,000, Donald quit his job, expecting to get a windfall. He spent a large sum on gambling, racking up a debt of $300,000. The situation was dire, with the lenders demanding repayment within a week. However, Donald thought he could solve everything with the ATM card linked to the $500,000. He continued his lavish spending without worry, but when he went to the bank that evening, he couldn't withdraw the money. Now, without the $500,000, Donald's future was uncertain. Realizing the urgency of his situation, Donald, who had abandoned the divorce papers and stolen the ATM card, shamelessly contacted me like this. Please help me. I don't know what will happen if this continues. Donald's voice was filled with panic, and it seemed there was no lie in his story. His foolishness elicited a deep sigh from me. Donald had done the unthinkable, seduced by the prospect of a large sum of money, recklessly spending $300,000 in just a few days. If the old me who had tolerated his terrible behavior and lived modestly with Donald were here, I might have extended a helping hand. But now I was a different person, with no love left for Donald. No matter how much he begged, I felt no pity, only amusement that he thought I would care. Still, Donald hadn't given up. "Please help me. You're the only one I have left," he pleaded. His pleas were unbearably annoying. I wanted to get rid of this nuisance and focus on my treatment. This situation was Donald's own making. If he had shown concern for me as a husband and brought my things the day I asked, I might have shared some of the $500,000 with him, but he chose not to. "I'm sorry, but I have no intention of giving you the $500,000 or helping you. It's all your own responsibility. After all this time of not behaving like a husband, it's cowardly to ask for help now just because we're technically still married." I spoke with unyielding harshness. "Don't be so cruel. We were married, after all. Our long relationship doesn't just disappear with a divorce paper." Donald tried to appeal to our past relationship. "What relationship? You had only been leaning on me. You're making excuses to manipulate the situation in your favor. I don't want to waste another minute on you. I will not give you the $500,000, no matter what you say." Donald became even more desperate. "Please, Emily, I'm begging you. You're the only one I can turn to. If you abandon me, I don't know what will happen to me." It was as if he was blaming me for his plight, but it was Donald's fault. If he hadn't recklessly splurged, he wouldn't be facing this future. If Donald hadn't decided to cut me off just because he thought he had access to money, none of this would have happened. "Stop making excuses. You're reaping what you sowed. Handle it yourself. Goodbye." With that, I ended the call. I ignored several subsequent calls from Donald and blocked his contact to ensure no further communication. Since the divorce papers were duly submitted, Donald and I were officially strangers now. I embraced my newfound freedom and faced my battle with cancer, which after a long struggle, I finally overcame and was discharged from the hospital. I heard from a friend that Donald's whereabouts have been unknown since then. After losing contact with me, he desperately reached out to his in-laws and friends, trying to borrow money. However, his urgency and the amount needed, $300,000, raised suspicion, and nobody lent him a penny. In other words, he was unable to repay the $300,000 he borrowed. Donald's fate is unknown to me, but he's likely suffering more than if he were in hell. I couldn't help but feel a sense of deep satisfaction. As for me, post-cancer, I moved out of the house I shared with Donald, found a new home, and began working from home, enjoying my independence. Fortunately, my finances are secure. Friends occasionally ask if I'll find new love, but recalling my hellish life with Donald has put me off marriage. I prefer to live freely alone. "What's with this awful food? Don't stress out a pregnant woman," my son's wife yelled at me. Then, to my surprise, my usually mild-mannered and kind husband suddenly stood up and took away the meal. "Never come back here again," he commanded. "Excuse me?" My son's wife froze on the spot. "Too bad, Lily. Olivia, what do you mean?" I looked down on my son's wife from above. A person who can't cherish their family is not fit to be my son's wife. My son's wife, usually so full of confidence, now had an unusually troubled look on her face. This was the end. "My name is Olivia, and I'm 70 years old. This year marks the 40th anniversary of my marriage to my husband, Nicholas. Time flies faster than one would think. We met as classmates in college. He was always calm and gentle, and I was attracted to him from the start. But in our time, arranged marriages were the norm. Only a few could be with the one they loved, so I kept my feelings for him a secret. I thought it would be a bother if he knew, but by the second half of our college life, rumors somehow spread that I liked him. I quickly realized it was because I had confided in a classmate. What would I do if he found out? Not long after, my husband called me. "Will you go out with me?" For a moment, I thought I was dreaming. I never imagined the kind-hearted Nicholas, who was nice to everyone, would notice me. Besides, I thought you'd be arranged to meet some lovely young lady, but it was all a misunderstanding. "I won't have an arranged marriage. I want to be with you, Olivia." His words marked the beginning of our relationship. Even as a couple, he treated me just as he did when we were friends. He was so thoughtful that he even gifted me trips on my birthdays. Was I really worthy of this much happiness? I was grateful to the classmate who shared my feelings. For the first time, I realized how wonderful it was to be with someone who reciprocated my love. We got married when we both turned 30. Our wedding was attended by all our college friends. Being blessed by everyone, I felt like the happiest person in the world. Our marriage continued smoothly and our son, William, was born. He was our only child and my husband, and I raised him with all our love. I wanted him to grow up to be as kind as his father. Eventually, William grew up just as I had hoped, becoming a gentle and considerate man, kind to everyone. Even as an adult and working professional, he continued living at home. At that time, most of his peers were living independently, which made me worry about his future. I hoped he would marry and have a happy family, but I wondered if he felt the same. Of course, if he preferred staying with us, that was fine too. I knew we had to respect his decisions. My husband, ever so kind, chose to watch and wait. It's William's choice, he said, not interfering much. William continued to live with us until he turned 40. He was serious about his work. On his days off, he prioritized family and always took care of us. Maybe it's fine to stay together as a family, I began to think. Just the three of us living peacefully might be enough. But then my son made an announcement. I'm getting married. We were surprised by his sudden news. Congratulations. Thanks, Dad and Mom. I'll work hard to build a family like yours. Be happy, we told him. I wondered what kind of person my son's wife would be. I looked forward to meeting her. Her parents would also be there at the introduction. Finally, the day arrived. Nice to meet you. My son's wife's name was Lily. She was tall and had a cool demeanor. The in-laws, on the other hand, were both smiling and seemed kind. We're looking forward to being a family, they greeted us with a smile, making us smile too. I thought we could get along well with them. That's when it happened. William's parents are like grandparents, huh? My son's wife suddenly interjected. What are you saying? The in-laws scolded my son's wife. Well, I just thought they'd be younger. Y'all are old too. Initially, it seemed the in-laws were older than us. Isn't that an inappropriate way to talk to parents who raised you? I struggled to contain my anger. My son and his wife decided to live together in an apartment. For the first time, I felt a sense of loneliness being apart from my son. But this is the happiness my son, now over 40, has finally found. I decided to quietly watch over him, or so I thought. However, our peaceful life was soon to be disrupted. First, my husband seemed to take a liking to my son's wife. I was surprised he could like someone who spoke to us like that at our first meeting. When I asked him about it, he said, "It's better to have someone who speaks their mind clearly." I felt a bit bad recalling how timid I was when we first met. I even wondered if he actually preferred someone assertive like my son's wife. But since they lived apart, I thought we wouldn't have to interact much. Hopefully, they could live peacefully. We, a couple in our 70s, didn't have time to worry in the remaining years of our lives. Though my son left home after getting married, he surprisingly returned home frequently. Initially, it was once a week, then gradually increasing to 2 or 3 times. At first, I was happy as only my son returned. He would bring food and even help clean the house. Despite being busy with his own home, he cared for us, which was heartwarming. I was happy to have such a good son. But then, one day, his wife started coming with him. She's family now, so I want Lily to get along with you, Mom and Dad, he explained. It seemed my son was considering us and his wife. My husband, who initially liked her, was pleased, but for me, it was somewhat annoying. I couldn't change my first impression of her disdainful attitude. My husband didn't seem to mind, but it always bothered me. My son was trying to connect us, and I didn't want to dwell on it forever. Perhaps she might be a nice person after all. I waited for them that day. "We're home," my son said as they arrived. But what his wife said next shocked me. It's dirty." Was she talking about the entrance? I was sure I cleaned thoroughly. Was there something dirty? What's wrong? I asked as I went to check. "William's house is always dirty, isn't it? Maybe because y'all are so old," she remarked. It was clearly a jab at me. Our house is old indeed. It's the house we built right after we got married, over 40 years ago. It's true that it has become older and dirtier over the years, but is it appropriate for her, my daughter-in-law, to say that to me? When I got married, I treated my mother-in-law as my own parent. Without her, my husband wouldn't have been born, and we wouldn't have met. Plus, she was very kind, like my husband. I quickly realized that it was her upbringing that shaped my husband, so I respected her. But what about my son's wife? She doesn't treat me with the respect due to a mother-in-law and talks to me as if I'm a friend. I often hear that wives should be like friends nowadays, but something is different with her. She fundamentally lacks manners. It's rude to talk about age to someone you've just met. And she's too assertive towards us. Your house is like a haunted house, huh? She continued. Well, it's an old house, my son responded to his wife with a smile. He seemed unaware that he was being ridiculed. In crucial aspects, my son grew up to be oblivious. This might lead him to be completely under his wife's thumb. My fears were becoming a reality. Could you get some coffee? She demanded. I'll prepare it right now, I replied. Ew, this is terrible, she said after tasting it. I'll get you another one, I offered. My son's wife thoroughly bossed me around. She acted as if it were her own home, not her in-laws. I appealed to my husband with my eyes, but he didn't even glance my way. My son's wife complained about the coffee I served. Did I replace it 5 times? Not wanting to waste the coffee, I secretly transferred the replaced coffee into another container. Finally, my son's wife seemed satisfied but didn't say a single word of thanks. Am I just a servant? Despite being treated like this, my son and husband didn't even try to help. Both were enamored by my son's wife. It was frustrating how they both seemed to like similar types of people. Even if she were my age, she's definitely not the type I'd want to be friends with. We're going back to clean our house now, she said after complaining for a while. My son's wife finally left with my son. I was genuinely relieved they had gone. After they left, I thoroughly disinfected the cups and plates she used. I instinctively felt repulsed by my son's wife. I know I should get along with her since she's my son's wife, but instinctively, I don't want anything to do with her. I can't discuss this with my son or husband since they both like her, so I discreetly disinfect everything she's touched to ease my mind. That was the only way I could vent. My son and his wife continued to visit 2 or 3 times a week. Despite having a beautiful apartment, they mostly spent time at our house. Today, she talked about her family. I'm the middle of 3 sisters, sick of parents who only doted on my elder and younger sister. Most of her talk was complaints. Her elder and younger sisters went to good universities, but she, being the middle child, only graduated from a local junior college. She always seemed dissatisfied with her parents favoring her siblings, but I think they loved Lily too. My son tried to reassure her. I agree with him. If her parents didn't care for her, they wouldn't have smiled so warmly at our first meeting. When I shared this with her, she suddenly got angry. I didn't ask for your opinion. Can you just be quiet? She snapped. I intended to be thoughtful, but it only made her more uncomfortable. I really felt like nothing more than a servant, and being called you was particularly shocking. I realized she never called me Olivia since marrying my son. The thought of being just you to her felt empty. After venting her frustrations, she seemed satisfied and left. Then I meticulously cleaned the chair she had sat in. As I polished the chair, tears started to fall from my eyes. Why do I have to endure this? What about me does my son's wife dislike? It's not just me. She behaves the same way towards my husband and son and even her own parents. Does she have anyone she can open her heart to? I started to feel sorry for her, but remembering what she does, I couldn't help but be angry. I honestly didn't want to associate with a wife who treated our family like servants and called us you. However, the frequency of their visits increased, and they eventually spent every weekend at our house. No matter how badly my son's wife behaved, my son and husband just laughed it off. Like my husband, my son grew to be oblivious. Their kindness is great, but it can be exploited by the wrong people. For the first time, I was angry at my son and my husband. One day, we received news that my son's wife was pregnant. Though it should have been happy news, I had mixed feelings. We need to go shopping for clothes. Yes, what would be a good gift? My husband was overjoyed about the arrival of his first grandchild. Every time we went shopping, he would stop at the baby section to buy something. Thinking of it as my son's wife's child, I couldn't genuinely feel happy. I always worried if the child would grow up to be mean and domineering. I couldn't voice such thoughts, so I silently accompanied my husband on his gift selections. I continued to treat my son and his wife with the utmost hospitality when they visited. I just wish they could be a bit quieter. It's not a party hall. I felt increasing irritation towards my still domineering son's wife and my inability to be genuinely happy about the grandchild. Then an incident occurred. Olivia suddenly came to our house to give birth. Of course, I hadn't heard anything about this. My son was carrying a lot of his wife's luggage. Pregnant women need to eat nutritious food. In the sudden turn of events, I prepared a meal using what I had. It turned out delicious. I then took it to my son's wife. She still had a stern expression. As she tasted the food, she spat it out immediately. "What's this awful food? Don't stress out a pregnant woman." I didn't mean to. I was shocked to be spoken to like that. Even though my cooking didn't suit her taste, I had tried my best considering she was close to giving birth. But then an unexpected person appeared. My usually gentle and kind husband suddenly stood up and took away the dishes. What happened? I was surprised by my husband's sudden action. He looked coldly at my son's wife and said, "Never come back here." My son's wife was stunned. She probably never expected to be spoken to like that. My husband had always been very kind to her. She must have completely trusted that he was on her side. "You mean me?" "Never come back," she timidly asked my husband. "That's right. I won't tolerate anyone who looks down on my wife." "What?" My son's wife was defiant. "You're on my side, right?" She addressed my husband as you as well. I was utterly disgusted by her attitude. "Enough already," I yelled, and then the doorbell rang. Who could it be at this time? It turned out to be my son's wife's parents. We're sorry for the sudden visit. Her in-laws had come unexpectedly. They looked dismayed. "So you were here. Why are you here?" My son's wife was still defiant. "We came to take you back." "What?" I explained everything to the in-laws. Surprisingly, they didn't even know about the pregnancy. "We're sorry, she hasn't contacted us since the marriage. She hadn't reached out to them even once after getting married. They must have been quite upset." Her parents seemed regretful, admitting they might have favored the other sisters. "It's true we may have paid more attention to her sisters." That's exactly what my son's wife had said. I had heard that middle children sometimes become twisted or strong-willed, but I didn't expect it to be this extreme. Her in-laws then said to me, "We want to take responsibility as her parents. They seemed like such kind and considerate people. It was a shame." "Why did you tell them everything?" My son's wife looked at me coldly. I used to think her sharp eyes were cool, but now they seemed only to look down on others. "You need to leave this house," I said to her. "What are you talking about? I'm the wife of this house." She objected as expected, but I couldn't back down if I wanted to get rid of her. "What do you mean?" That's when the in-laws produced something. At first, I was confused, but then I realized it was a listening device. They played it, and it was a recording from inside their apartment. All that family is so useless, completely under my control. "How stupid," the voice of my son's wife said, talking to a friend on the phone. "Well, after the baby's born, I can use that as a reason to divorce and claim alimony. Any reason will do with those people." My husband and son were at a loss for words. I was speechless too. I couldn't believe she had been mocking our family like this. Her parents were silent as well. "You really underestimated our family." I looked down on my son's wife as she crumbled. "Too bad, Lily." "Olivia, what do you mean?" She didn't seem to realize what she had done. "A person who can't cherish their family doesn't belong in ours." Until now, my son's wife had been brimmy with confidence, but now her complexion was the worst I'd ever seen. "This is the end, Lily. Let's go," said her father, who had been so cheerful when we first met, now had a demonic expression. "Why do I have to leave?" My son's wife was visibly shaken, hearing what was on that listening device. I'm at a loss for words. I never thought she was this kind of person. "We're going home now," her father said. "Wait, I'm already married." She resisted and didn't move. I was angered by her attitude. "Don't you even appreciate being raised? I understand that you felt lonely because your parents paid more attention to your elder and younger sisters." I slammed the table. "But they still came to see you. They've always been worried about you." My son's wife moved as if surprised. "You repay kindness with ingratitude. Don't just hold grudges, make some effort yourself." She had always been a self-centered queen, never making any effort. Perhaps she was too caught up in her childhood memories to see the current situation. "Please forgive me, Olivia," my son's wife apologized again, but it was too late. "I never thought I had such a wife." "Get out." My husband was also angry. The in-laws pulled away their crying daughter and left the house. "Don't ever come near my family again." I screamed louder than I ever had before. Finally, the battle was over. After screaming, I collapsed to the ground, exhausted. It might have been the accumulation of all the fatigue, but my heart felt clear. My son and his wife eventually divorced after discussions with the in-laws. My son took custody of the child. It would be a pity for the child to be raised by her. My first grandchild resembled my son, and I was very relieved. The smile the child sometimes showed was just like my son's. My husband and son apologized to me later. They were initially shocked by her escalating behavior and lacked the courage to fight back, afraid of her retaliation. So they took it out on me. "Don't get involved with strange people again," I said. They looked guilty but later laughed, perhaps realizing they had indeed been caught up with a strange person. Oh, my sweet grandchild, my kind husband and son. Now we're living peacefully as a family of 4. I've come to realize again how much I love spending time with my family. I want to enjoy today peacefully, looking forward to my grandchild's growth. What does it mean to cancel a policy? I began whispering during my lunch break at work after realizing my voice had been unintentionally loud during a phone call. I hadn't made any arrangements to cancel my insurance policy, so I was puzzled and frustrated. My mind went blank. The insurance company representative on the other end of the line, a calm woman, contrasted sharply with my distress. "According to our records, we received a request for policy cancellation from your end, and the procedure has been completed," she said. I had been subscribed to a savings-oriented life insurance policy. My sister-in-law, Rachel, an insurance agent with demanding job quotas, had persuaded me to get an insurance policy that was more expensive than the market rate. I'm Stella, a 40-year-old office worker living in an apartment with my husband and daughter. Today has been tough from the start. My husband announced he was going on an overnight business trip as soon as he woke up and started packing his bags. Our daughter, Amy, began fussing over her missing math textbook. Amy is only in 1st grade, so her need for help is expected. But when my husband starts fussing about his missing travel bag and new socks, it can be quite a handful. I've been contemplating divorce for a while due to our rocky relationship over the past year, and this kind of thing just adds to the irritation. "Why don't you both prepare the day before?" I couldn't help but say out loud. Amy obediently apologized and promised to be more careful next time, to which I replied, "That's okay, honey. I should have helped you check it yesterday. I'm sorry." My husband, however, was different. "Amy is still young. If you were taking care of everything, she wouldn't be in this mess. And if you had bought me new socks, I wouldn't be complaining like this." I was furious at his petty complaints. "I had no idea about your business trip. There are freshly laundered socks in the drawer. Isn't that okay?" "I like to wear brand new socks when I'm on a business trip," he replied. "What's with that weird fixation?" I thought but kept my thoughts to myself. He goes on these overnight business trips maybe once every few months. His company must have scheduled it in advance, but he just didn't bother telling me. If he needed new socks, he could have bought them himself or at least told me ahead of time. Amy looked like she was about to cry and said, "Mom, Dad, stop arguing." So I turned to her and said, "I'm sorry, Amy. It's all right. Let's find your textbook together." My husband resumed his packing in silence, and I helped Amy with her backpack. I sneaked a glance at him and noticed he was packing more casual clothes instead of his usual business attire. Is he cheating again? Something felt off. He has cheated on me twice before. The first time was right before Amy was born. I thought about divorce then, but he begged and cried for forgiveness, even getting our in-laws involved. My mother-in-law pleaded with me to stay with her son, and my sister-in-law Rachel implored me not to abandon her brother, so I decided against the divorce. But then last year, he cheated on me again. It was the same as before, a girl he met on a dating app. My husband is the type to blurt out whatever comes to his mind, and his actions are quite transparent. He thinks he's keeping his actions secret. As far as I'm concerned, it's almost as if he wasn't even trying to hide anything. In an instant, he's busted, and there he is again, apologizing profusely while weeping, even though he usually struts around with such arrogance. Seeing him crying with his nose running is just pitiful. I swear if there's another issue, we're done. I declared to my husband, made him fill out the divorce papers, transferred all of our savings into my account, and though I forgave him, any love I had has completely vanished. My husband always puts himself first. I can't forgive him for not caring for our daughter Amy or spending time with her, but I plan to endure until Amy gets a bit older before getting a divorce. In the end, Amy's math textbook was easily found inside her backpack. Amy left for school full of joy, but I was completely drained from the morning ordeal. I didn't have time to prepare my packed lunch, so I went to a deli near my office during my lunch break. That's when a poster from an insurance company caught my eye, and I suddenly remembered that my policy was the kind where you receive a celebratory cashback after a certain period. I think it should be deposited any time now. I'm paying a hefty premium every month. After all, without such little joys, I wouldn't be able to continue. I wondered what I'd use the money for once it comes in. I could buy Amy some new fall clothes. I was starting to feel a little excited. With a spring in my step, I dropped by the bank to update my passbook and found that not only was there no celebration money, but this month's insurance premium hadn't been deducted yet. That's strange. Isn't the premium supposed to be deducted the same month I received the bonus? Initially, I was simply baffled, but recalling my husband's shady actions this morning, I had a bad feeling and decided to call the insurance company. It turns out Rachel, my sister-in-law, was off for the day. Another woman picked up and filled me in, revealing the cancellation of my policy. She said the cancellation fee had already been paid, but I didn't see any such deposit in my account. The lady on the phone kept insisting that all paperwork was in order and that the insurance company had done everything by the book. It would be a huge issue if the policy was canceled without my consent. It felt like she was indirectly implying that the insurance company wasn't at fault. Let me make this very clear. I had absolutely no intention of canceling my policy. I'll check with Rachel and my husband, but you at the insurance company better confirm with Rachel too. I stuck it to them and then hung up. Before I knew it, lunch break was almost over. I didn't even have time to eat the lunch I'd brought from the deli, but my appetite was gone anyway, and I had other matters to attend to. I asked my boss if I could leave early, then I got down to completing the remainder of my work. I left the office a bit earlier than usual and immediately called my husband's cell phone. If he really was busy working and couldn't answer the call, that's just how it would have to be. Stella, why are you calling me? I'm at work. After a few rings, my husband picked up the phone, despite grumbling that he was at work. There was upbeat, merry music playing in the background. I wondered why my husband thought he wouldn't get caught. This is absurd. I'm sorry about that. Hey, my life insurance was canceled without my consent, and there's no cash value. Do you know anything about this? I'm thinking I might have been scammed, and I'm considering going to the police. What? The police? What the hell are you thinking? It was me, okay. I had suspected it was the work of my husband and Rachel, so I exaggerated my claims. My husband was startled and immediately confessed. I was somewhat relieved, but my anger began to rise. Oh really, it was you? Where's the cash value then? I used it to support my mom. Support? Did something happen to my mother-in-law? Did she suddenly need money? No, she just said she wanted to take a family trip to the holiday resorts every now and then. A trip? I was surprised at the unexpected words. You canceled my life insurance without my consent for something like that. You used it for travel expenses. The business trip was a lie. Yeah, I'm the beneficiary, so I don't see a problem. We're all going to stay in a luxury hotel. I'm in the lobby right now, and there's an amazing chandelier. Maybe he thought it was okay to open up because he got caught already. My husband bragged in an excited tone. What the heck? I have a complaint. I have a lot of complaints. Why did you cancel without my consent? I'm the one paying the premium for my own salary, right? You guys should be able to afford your own travel expenses. Oh, shut up. After all, if something happens to you, I'm the one who gets the money, so it's my money. You're healthy and you're not going to die anytime soon. You can just take out another policy. I can't understand my husband's arguments at all. The conditions change as you get older and the insurance premiums get higher. Do you really not understand that? Well, I'm not the one who's paying. I had a headache from my husband's irresponsible words. Do your parents and Rachel know that you canceled my life insurance without my consent? Didn't my father-in-law say anything? Rachel is obviously an accomplice. You and Rachel forged my handwriting and stamped it right. Well, yeah, my mom and dad were happy and said it was a good idea. After all, you're the one holding all our money, so it's all your fault. I want to take a break and have some fun once in a while. It's okay, right? We came on a family trip and everyone's happy. The family you're talking about includes your father, mother, and Rachel, right? Why aren't Amy and I included? Isn't your family Amy and me? Insurance is for emergencies, and I'd be happier if I didn't have to use it. Shouldn't you consult me first if you want to support travel expenses? Because you would definitely say no. You and Amy are always together, so it's okay to be with the family for a change. And besides, Rachel said she wanted to take out a new life insurance policy for you, so they thought it was like killing two birds with one stone. That's just for you guys, huh? Unbelievable. You don't want to admit something because it's considered bad. What an excuse. Aren't you embarrassed behaving like grade schoolers? You're making me not want to talk by getting angry like this. What a pain in the ass. If you keep up this bickering, I wouldn't mind getting a divorce. I bet you couldn't pull it off. Perhaps emboldened by being in a tourist spot, my husband sounded more assertive than usual. Understood. I hung up the phone. Brace yourself. I'll get back at my in-laws and my husband for all of this, I murmured to myself. My patience had reached its end. My husband had been underestimating me because I'd always forgiven him, even though he kept threatening divorce. I had thought my in-laws were normal people and Rachel wasn't a bad person, despite her insistence on pushing for a high life insurance policy. But normal, sensible people wouldn't unilaterally cancel their daughter-in-law's life insurance and misuse the money. This is what I get for marrying into this family. I'll cut them all off. I immediately headed to the court. I always kept the divorce papers my husband had filled out in my bag like a talisman. I submitted the divorce papers right away, then picked up my daughter Amy from an after-school program. On our way home, I told Amy about the divorce. Amy was surprised, but after explaining carefully, she accepted it. When we got home, Amy asked, "So Dad isn't coming back home anymore?" "Your dad won't be back tonight because he's on a business trip. We're getting divorced, so we're going to live separately, but we still need to prepare for that. Then let's start packing right away. Hurry." "Huh? What's going on?" "Well, you're breaking up with Dad, right? You don't have to cry anymore. I don't like him because he's always mad." "Wait, Amy, did you always try to stop us from fighting because you didn't want me to be sad?" "Of course. I had intended not to divorce for Amy's sake, but it seems she had been putting up with the situation all this time. The reason why Amy was always trying to intervene in our fights was simply because she was worried about me. Dad never plays with me, even on his days off, and he tells me to go away whenever I talk to him. He only uses me when he wants to say something mean to you, like this morning. I've always been sad because I love you, Mom." Amy smiled slightly. Her smile pierced my heart. My husband, who was selfish and always prioritizes himself, had been seen through not only by me but also by Amy. And it seems Amy had had enough of my husband. It was heartbreaking to learn of Amy's true feelings in this way, and I felt like crying. "I see. I'm sorry, Amy. I've made you go through a lot. From now on, it's going to be just the two of us. But I'll take good care of you. I really love you." Yay! I vowed never to let Amy be sad again. While Amy was doing her homework, I kept myself busy by reaching out to a lawyer, searching for realtors and movers online. Then I contacted my parents. When I explained the situation, they told me to come back home right away. Amy didn't have to transfer schools. Moreover, if it was tomorrow morning, my father said he could borrow a truck from an acquaintance and help us move our things. I contacted the landlord and the elementary school, briefly explaining that we'd be commuting from my parents' home from now on. I decided to deal with the paperwork from the school gradually, and I called work to take a vacation day tomorrow. I wanted to get most things done before my husband got home. The next day, my parents came over and we quickly moved our stuff to my parents' home. Everything was done before my husband got home, and only his belongings were left in the apartment. I left a note saying, "We are divorced. We are now strangers," and left the apartment. When my husband came home and realized we were gone, he would undoubtedly be stunned. Serves him right. The thought of it made me feel triumphant. The reason I was able to prepare for the divorce so smoothly this time is that I had researched the necessary procedures and preparations when he cheated on me before. I had warned him then. Next time there will be no discussion. We will divorce. We had agreed that I would keep custody and all of our shared assets. In this way, my daughter and I started our new life at my parents' house. A few days later, I received a frantic call from my mother-in-law. My husband's phone was blocked, so I suppose she called me on his behalf. He is a weak man who cries easily despite his arrogance, so he might be crying pitifully. "What are you thinking? You're divorcing even though my son didn't cheat," she yelled so loudly it made my ears ring, and I instinctively moved my phone away from me. "Hey Stella, it's not too late. Apologize to my son right now. He's been crying because he's hurt. Aren't you embarrassed, making a big fuss over something like this?" "Huh? Apologize? Me? Why?" I couldn't comprehend her words and found myself blurting out, "Who are you?" "Huh? She probably didn't expect such a response from me. She stopped speaking abruptly. I was surprised by my own words that just slipped out. Hey, it's me, your mother-in-law. Come on, Stella, what's gotten into you? You can't possibly be going senile. You're still young. No, I only have one mother. If you don't identify yourself, could this be a scam call? I decided to write on my slip of the tongue. After all, we're strangers now that we're divorced, and there's no point in having a serious conversation with people who unilaterally cancel a life insurance policy. Don't be ridiculous, Stella. If you're going to take that attitude, I have a few things to say too. As expected, my mother-in-law was furious, but I didn't care. What are you talking about? Do you think you can do something? I had an agreement with him that if there was any issue, we would divorce immediately. He told me on the phone that we were getting divorced, you know. My words left her speechless. I took the opportunity to press on. If he wanted to go on a trip, he should have just talked to me about it. Why did he have to commit a crime? Is your whole family looking to end up in jail or something? I think canceling life insurance without consent qualifies as forgery. You know that could lead to imprisonment from 3 months to 5 years? So I'm ready to fight this thoroughly. I don't want to hear about how his family has no savings or they're poorer. My husband might have just done this nonchalantly, but that's precisely why I can't forgive him. What? Hold on a minute. We can have criminals in this family. Hey, sorry, listen to me, please. Perhaps surprised by the mention of imprisonment, my mother-in-law, who had been on a roll just a moment ago, suddenly became submissive. But it was too late. I hung up and blocked all calls from my husband's family. After that, my husband was so shocked by the divorce that he voluntarily left his job and became a shut-in. As for the life insurance, we use the financial ADR system, which resolves insurance-related disputes outside of court and successfully settled. Rachel, my sister-in-law, was disciplined and fired from her insurance company. It even made minor headlines. Because of this, the in-laws became the talk of the town and were shamed by relatives, being told things like, "You have no common sense and have some shame." It seems they were quite uncomfortable. Both my husband and Rachel have become unable to work and are in quite a financial crunch. I'm living freely with my daughter Amy back at my parents' house. I want to make up for the hardship I've put Amy through by showering her with plenty of love. My father-in-law just passed away. Can you come home as soon as possible? I got the call from my daughter-in-law, Amelia, while my son was taking a bath during a family visit. With an anxious tone, she informed me about my husband's death. Confused and shocked, I yelled into the phone, "Wait a minute. My name is Janie. I'm 51, and ever since the sudden loss of my husband, I've been raising our son, Kobe, as a single mom." Kobe, who was in high school at the time, has now graduated college and has been working for 3 years. After getting his job, he moved out and started living on his own. Now he's married, and he and his wife help each other to make a good life. His wife, Amelia, is on the quiet side and, according to Kobe, is good at household chores, a good wife. However, from the first time we met, she seemed distant, like she wanted to keep some space between us. I mentioned it to Kobe, but he just laughed it off, saying it was all in my head. But I couldn't shake off the feeling that Amelia preferred to avoid our home. She only shows up for Thanksgiving and leaves without spending the night, which only confirms my suspicion. Kobe is my only son, and I had always hoped to get along with his wife. I've even asked Amelia directly if there was something bothering her. Being as gentle as possible, I asked if I had done anything to make her uncomfortable. She simply replied, "No, nothing at all." I eventually gave up on getting close to Amelia, thinking it's just the way younger people feel nowadays. They don't want to mingle with their in-laws even if they live separately. What's more, I sense a similar distance with Amelia's own parents when we met for the first time at the wedding. I mentioned to them that my husband had passed away years ago, and it seemed to create even more of a gap, even though Kobe had told them from the beginning that I was a single mom. Maybe seeing it firsthand created some negative impression of me. So, I've decided not to intrude on Kobe's marriage and quietly observed the wedding. Since then, the gap has grown between me, Amelia, and her family. Even though my son and his wife live relatively close, our family dynamics have become distant. Today, Kobe brought over some wedding photos, but of course, Amelia was nowhere to be seen. I feel grateful. When I saw Kobe noticing my disappointment, he offered to stay over tonight, even though he was alone. It made me proud to see how kind-hearted he has become. Looking at the picture of Amelia, I found myself smiling, thinking how pretty she looks when she's laughing next to Kobe. It's tough to suppress the loneliness when my own daughter-in-law avoids me for reasons I can't understand, even though we still get along. After carefully storing the photo and having dinner, I idly flipped through a TV variety show. I was waiting for Kobe to finish his shower when a familiar melody rang out from Kobe's phone left on the table. It was the default ringtone. Curiously, I glanced at the phone. It was a call from Amelia. I decided to let Kobe know about it later and turned back to the TV. But then the phone started ringing again. Given the incessant calls, I thought it might be urgent but hesitated to answer it myself. Reluctantly, I grabbed the still ringing phone and headed to the bathroom to tell Kobe. Kobe, Amelia's calling. The phone's been ringing a few times now. I subtly hinted for him to pick up. But Kobe brushed it off, saying, "It's fine, charge it for me, will you? Got any snacks? I could go for a drink after my shower. I'll be out soon." "You're really becoming like your dad, aren't you?" I said, holding the phone. I headed back to the living room and tried to plug it in but fumbled and accidentally hit the answer button. In my rush to hang up, I hit the speaker instead, and Amelia's frantic voice burst out. "Can you hear me? Dad has passed away. Come home as soon as possible." It looked like I had picked up a very serious call. What do I say to Amelia, who's just lost her dad? Or should I first apologize for answering her call, even if it was an accident? My mind was racing, and I lost sight of the option to hang up. Meanwhile, Amelia started explaining the situation, saying that Kobe needed to come over to the nursing home where his father had been living. Startled, I asked when he had moved into a nursing home, considering Kobe's father had passed away 8 years ago. Amelia had no idea that it was me on the line. She thought she was talking to Kobe, so her surprise made sense. I quickly explained the situation and steered the conversation back to her father, but she corrected me, slightly annoyed. "It's not my dad. It's Kobe's father who has passed away. Tell him to call me back." I was utterly confused but quickly spoke into the phone still on speaker mode. "Wait a second, Amelia. Isn't this some kind of mistake? Like I told you before, Kobe's dad passed away 8 years ago." Amelia seemed shocked by my statement. She stuttered momentarily but quickly regained her composure. "Now is not the time for lies. Why would you lie about something so heartless at a time like this?" Before I could make sense of Amelia's sudden accusation, the room fell silent. In that moment, I noticed Kobe, his face pale, holding the phone. The call had ended. He had likely rushed over after hearing our heated conversation while taking a shower. Water was still dripping from his hair. It was clear that he'd hurriedly grabbed the phone. I asked Kobe, who was deliberately avoiding eye contact with me, "What is going on? What did Amelia mean when she said your father just passed away? I had made it clear to her before you got married that your father had passed. Why would she think otherwise?" When I pressed Kobe, who was visibly uneasy, he dodged my questions. Whether it was a misunderstanding on Amelia's part or someone who was like a father to him, it was clear he was hiding something. We had been having a tense exchange for a while when Kobe's cell phone buzzed. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar name, but it looked like it was probably from a nursing home. While Kobe hesitated to pick up, knowing what to expect from the call, he eventually answered right in front of me. Trying to remain silent, I listened in. I could hear most of the conversation, and the caller indeed confirmed what Amelia had been saying. After ending the call, Kobe looked straight into my eyes and finally came clean, leaving me nearly faint. Apparently, he had introduced Amelia to a man unrelated to the family as his father. "I told Amelia that Mom cheated and got divorced," he said. It seemed Kobe had completely fabricated the story for Amelia. According to this version, I had neglected my husband, who was suffering from early onset dementia, had an affair, and was served with divorce papers. But due to issues like alimony, I had dragged out the discussions, eventually taking advantage of the progression of my husband's condition. I forced him into a nursing home and pushed all the costs and responsibilities onto my son. After agreeing to the divorce, my ex-husband's dementia had already progressed to the point where the issue of compensation for the affair was swept under the rug. Kobe, who lied about our divorce to his parents-in-law, was careful not to show Amelia his marriage certificate when he submitted it. Listening to this story, my mouth was hanging open in disbelief. "So, I told them Mom has been going around telling people Dad is dead. She's probably telling Amelia the same thing, but it's all lies," he explained. I couldn't believe he had been telling such elaborate lies. No wonder Amelia and my in-laws didn't think highly of me. When I scolded Kobe for lying, he hung his head like a scolded child and mumbled that he wanted extra money for leisure. He thought he could lessen the amount he gave to Amelia by saying he was using it to pay for his father's care home. Shockingly, Kobe even aimed to inherit fake assets from another man. Kobe, who works as a caregiver, met a man with dementia who was a landlord when he went to assist at another facility. Although the man was not yet 70, he had multiple health issues and had entered the facility to receive end-of-life care. The man likely had early-onset dementia and had deteriorated to the point where he didn't even recognize his real son. Kobe took advantage of this and started to act like he was the man's only son. On top of that, using his role as a caretaker, he had the man's real family pay for his residential fees. Meanwhile, he was also pocketing a few hundred every month as caregiving fees for doing small tasks. "All of you must be so busy. Don't worry, I'll take good care of him," he would say. Sometimes he'd even lie about the man's health to minimize family visits. Whenever he found the time, he would sit beside the man, even going so far as to have him write a will leaving all his inheritance to Kobe. Kobe's manipulative ways gained him the trust of the facility, as he even told them that he had lost contact with his father since our divorce. The real family eventually stopped showing up, and even the facility staff started recognizing Kobe as a family member. Listening to this appalling truth coming from my son made me wonder if he really was my son. Now that the man had passed away, there wasn't much that could be done. I forced myself to tell a remorseful-looking Kobe to quickly inform the real family of the man's passing. Later, I took Kobe to apologize to the real family, and when they heard the truth, they were understandably furious. "We will sue you for fraud," they yelled. Kobe politely apologized and pleaded to avoid a lawsuit, saying they could nullify the will. But this only enraged the family even more. From their perspective, nullifying the will was a given. Nothing had been resolved, including the caregiving fees and the manipulation of the deceased. Kobe, who seemed to think a simple apology would suffice, was at a loss in the face of the family's blazing anger and clung to me, nearly in tears. "Going to court is impossible, Mom. You know it too, right? I don't have money to pay for damages. I've told you everything. Help me. A mother always defends her child, doesn't she?" I can't say I'm completely unaffected by the desperate plea from the son I've raised for over 20 years, but I have no intention of helping him. He's done something truly awful, and I believe he needs to face the full wrath of the family and offer a sincere apology from the bottom of his heart. I apologized deeply, just like Kobe had, and all I could do was show my sorrow to the family as a parent. From that point on, Kobe's life spiraled downward. Amelia, who was his wife, filed for a quick divorce and returned to her parents' home. When faced with the prospect of divorce for lying so egregiously and swindling money from others, Kobe argued back, "I don't want to break up." The money was also for Amelia. When they expressed their wish for a swift divorce and even threatened legal action and financial claims, Kobe had no choice but to back down. He knew that he could be in legal trouble for what he'd done. Although no claims had yet been made, he was being sued by the family of the deceased man. Perhaps he realized that he wouldn't be able to handle additional claims from Amelia. Furthermore, Kobe got fired from his job. The company claimed he damaged their reputation and shattered their trust in caregivers. After the court's decision, Kobe was required to pay back the caregiving fees he had received as well as compensation for the emotional suffering of the deceased man's family. The will left by the deceased man was invalidated, taking into account the progress of his dementia. Kobe, who had almost no savings and was already unemployed, was now burdened with massive payments, including legal fees. Choosing city life for better job prospects, he rented a small, old apartment. He was barely making ends meet through day labor, trying hard to continue payments. He had reached out to me for help multiple times, and each time I told him I had already helped enough by co-signing his lease and urged him to reflect on his mistakes. Now, juggling multiple jobs and searching for better paying work, he doesn't even have the time to complain. As for me, I continue to live alone. However, Amelia and her parents graciously visited me to apologize. They said they were sorry for their ill-mannered behavior, which was based on a misunderstanding of me, but I knew it was all my son's fault. We left it at that, acknowledging the unresolved issues between us. Since there were no children and the divorce was finalized, I don't expect to meet Amelia again. However, we still exchange seasonal greetings through letters. One day, I received a call that shattered my world. My husband had been in an accident, The shock wasn't just the accident itself, but the news that his mistress had been in the car with him. She didn't survive, and my husband was left paralyzed from the waist down. Amidst this turmoil, he began demanding that I take care of him for the rest of his life. Was I expected to dedicate my life to caring for a man who had been cheating on me when he got into the accident? This couldn't be happening. I resolved to teach him a lesson. My name is Mandy, and I'm 32 years old. I live with my husband, Ray, and our daughter, Lily, who's almost 5. I had taken a break from my job when I got pregnant, but I began working again when Lily started daycare. Between work and raising a child, I'm always busy, but I also lead a fulfilling life, thanks to Ray. He has always worked diligently and takes great care of Lily, excelling as a husband, father, and head of our household. Our daily routine included having dinner and listening to Lily's stories after Ray got home from work. Daddy, listen, I drew a picture at daycare today. Oh, did you? You're really good at drawing, Lily. You should draw a picture of me next time. Okay, and Mary told me that her family went to the amusement park today. I want to go too. An amusement park, huh? How about we all go together next weekend? Really? Yay! I love you, Daddy. I love you too, Lily. Well, after your mom, of course. Ray would wink at me, and Lily would puff her cheeks out in pretend annoyance. These ordinary days with my family were my greatest treasure. But then, Ray started to change. He began coming home late and leaving early on his days off. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence, but the frequency of these strange behaviors began to concern me, so I decided to confront him. Ray, you've been coming home late a lot lately. Are you busy at work? Huh? Oh yeah, I got some new projects and stuff. I see. But you also leave early in the morning on your days off and never tell me where you're going. Well, I've been visiting my parents. I thought I should check up on them from time to time. Your parents' house? His parents weren't young, but we saw them every few months and they were doing fine. So why all these sudden visits? Although it was suspicious, I didn't press him further that day. 2 weeks later, Ray texted me again, saying, I'll be home late. I have overtime work to do. He didn't get home until after midnight, arriving in high spirits but seeming off. I noticed immediately. Ray, where have you been? I told you I had to work late. But what about that smell? What smell? The scent of sweet perfume. It's clearly a woman's fragrance. Why would you smell like that if you were working late? Actually, there was a client entertainment event today. A client event? Yes, one of the VIPs at the client's place is a woman. You'd expect some perfume to rub off if we were drinking together, right? Then why did you lie to me about overtime? I felt guilty because you were working hard at home, taking care of housework and Lily. I didn't mean to lie. I didn't want to make you worry. Seeing my husband's hands clasped in front of his face, I couldn't press him further. As I had work the next day, I decided to let it go and head to bed. Ever since, every time he came home late, I could smell that perfume on him. Whenever I asked him about it, all he would say was that it was another client event and nothing more. Unknown to him, my suspicions only grew stronger. One day, feeling that something was definitely off, I left Lily with my parents and decided to meet my younger sister. As soon as we settled at a cafe, I started to discuss my husband's behavior with her. Ray has been coming home late a lot recently. So, you're saying he always has the scent of a woman's perfume, huh? Yeah, he's definitely cheating. Really? My sister gave a serious nod, confirming my suspicion. I had an inkling myself, but hearing it from a third party made me believe it even more. So Ray is really cheating on me. Firstly, it's strange to have client events with the same clients so frequently. Besides, he must have been close enough for the perfume to stick, right? I guess so. I know it's tough with Lily and all, but I think you should have a serious talk with Ray. Yeah. Just then, my sister said in a disturbing tone, Hey, look there. What's going on? Speak of the devil, look over there. Isn't that your husband? Following the direction of her finger, I saw Ray. Next to him, a young woman younger than me was tightly clutching his arm. The sight was so cruel I was at a loss for words. Ignoring my state of shock, my sister started snapping pictures of them on her smartphone. Wait, what are you doing? What are you doing just standing there, sis? We need to gather evidence. But. No buts. Hurry up. I'll take pictures. You start recording a video. Urged by my sister, I shakily activated the camera app on my smartphone. Ray and the woman got into Ray's car, arm in arm, and kissed each other numerous times. I recorded everything that transpired. I stopped the recording once the car drove off. Here I was, Ray's wife, now holding evidence of my husband's infidelity. I had forgotten that we were in a cafe as tears started rolling down my cheeks. My sister remained silent for a while but then gripped my hand and firmly said, "Sis, I know it's hard, but you should really have a serious talk with Ray." I know, but this is also for Lily's sake. Can we just stand by and let such a despicable man who lies without remorse and cheats be her father? For Lily's sake. At my sister's words, I was jolted back to reality. That's right, the only one who can protect Lily is me. Ray may be Lily's dear father, but I have to confront this sooner rather than later. Now that I know what he's done, he has no right to be a father. After talking it over with my sister, we decided to have Lily stay at her parents' house for the day. I returned home to wait for my husband's return, but he didn't come back no matter how long I waited. Around 10 p.m., our rarely used landline rang. Who could it be at this hour? As I picked up the phone, a man's voice asked, "Is this Mrs. Johnson's residence?" "Yes, it is. Who am I speaking with?" "This is the police. This is Mr. Ray Johnson's residence, correct?" "Yes, it is. The police. Did my husband do something?" "Please stay calm. Your husband has been involved in an accident." "What?" "According to the police, my husband had a car accident, and a woman who was in the passenger seat lost her life. My husband was apparently taken to the nearby university hospital. I rushed to the hospital without even grabbing anything. At the university hospital, my husband was undergoing surgery in the emergency room. A police officer who rushed in explained the situation at the time of the accident. Based on the circumstances, it appears that your husband and the deceased woman were in a close relationship. Is that so?" Seeing my stunned response, the police officer questioned with a puzzled expression, "Did you have any suspicions, ma'am?" "Yes, just today I was about to confront him with the evidence of his affair." "I see. This is difficult to say, but there's a possibility that your husband might have some disability due to the aftermath of the accident." "That's enough. Just enough." In the subsequent conversation with the police, it was revealed that my husband's mistress was also married. The husband of the mistress, who had also rushed over, seemed very disoriented, and his expression was indescribable given that only Ray had survived. A few days later, my husband, who had finished his surgery, regained consciousness for the first time since the accident. Upon receiving the news, I headed to the hospital with my parents, sister, and daughter. I left Lily with my sister and only my parents, and I went into the hospital room. When we arrived, my in-laws were already there. As explained, it seemed that my husband was left with paralysis on one side of his body due to the accident. "I'm sorry, it seems I've caused you all some worry." My husband started to apologize remorsefully. Before I could respond, my in-laws rushed to his bed. "What are you apologizing for? It's good enough that you're alive. Being alive is like hitting the jackpot." "That's right, Ray. You're usually a good man, and that's why you survived this." "Dad, Mom, thank you. I'm really glad I survived." My husband and my in-laws were getting carried away as if the affair never existed. My worry turned into anger, and I finally spoke up. "Sorry to interrupt your celebration, but Ray, will you divorce me?" "What? Divorce? What are you suddenly talking about?" "I got these divorce papers. Can you please sign them?" "Divorce? What are you even saying?" "You had an accident with your mistress." "What? No, you got it all wrong. The woman in the car with me was just a business associate, not a mistress." My husband began to lie desperately. Did he really think he could hide it from me? "I already know the truth, Ray. I know you cheated." "No, I swear I didn't cheat. You were at a cafe with your mistress on the day of the accident, weren't you? I saw you two get into the car together." "No, that's not." "Don't make excuses. I had forgotten I was in a hospital room and raised my voice. You even cut down on time with Lily to play around with your mistress. What the hell were you thinking?" My mother-in-law interrupted me with a frown. "Oh dear, Mandy, what are you so angry about? If Ray cheated, it's because you did something wrong." "What? Mother-in-law? What are you saying?" Ray just regained consciousness, right? And you've heard it from the doctor. Ray ended up with hemiplegia due to the accident. What does that have to do with our divorce? From now on, he needs your dedicated care. If you have time to talk about divorce and such, you should be studying for caregiving right away. That's right, my husband echoed his mother. You'll be taking care of me from now on as my wife. At that moment, Any lingering sympathy I had for my husband evaporated. At first, I truly felt sorry for him, despite his cheating. Ending up with hemiplegia was tragic, but now, I couldn't care less. They had no remorse for what they had done to me. All they cared about was themselves. Suppressing my rage, I addressed my mother-in-law. Are you serious? Who in the hell would want to take care of a cheating idiot? An idiot? Mandy, how do you insult my Ray? Well, it's the truth, isn't it? He cheated and caused an accident. Isn't everything your son's fault? But even if the accident was his fault, cheating happens because of the other person. If I did something wrong, does that mean he's allowed to cheat? I was desperately trying to balance work, childcare, and housework for my family. You say it's my fault, and you still defend your cheating son. My unusually assertive tone made my mother-in-law's voice gradually quieter. My husband, unable to stand by, yelled at me, "How dare you talk to my mom like that?" Perhaps believing that being a patient made him superior, my husband glared at me. I moved closer to him, looking down on him with intensity, and he muttered, "What the?" in a frightened tone. "Cut the crap, would you? Who do you think is responsible for the situation we're in now?" "Well, that is. The reason we're in this mess is because you betrayed our family by cheating, right? Getting into an accident with your mistress. You must be a total fool. There's no other word for it." "What? It's all messy now because you suddenly started talking about divorce." He still seemed not to feel at fault for what had happened. With a deep sense of disgust and bitterness in my heart, I lashed out at him. "Grow up, you worthless man. How long are you going to blame everyone else? Anyway, think about it yourself. You're the one who cheated, and on top of that, your mistress died in an accident. Stop justifying yourself. Mandy, you destroyed our family with your thoughtless affair. I don't know how much pain Lily will have to go through because of you. You've not only hurt me, but you've also trampled on our daughter's heart. There's no way I could stay married to someone like you. Just go on and paralyze yourself for all I care." As I walked away, Ray was at a loss for words, his face pale. As I caught my breath, the hospital room door opened, and our daughter walked in. "Lily, how did?" "Sorry, sis, I took my eyes off Lily for just a moment." Following Lily, my younger sister entered the room, bowing her head apologetically. Seeing Lily, Ray seized the opportunity to latch onto our daughter. "Lily, you wouldn't want Mommy and Daddy to separate, right?" "Daddy, what do you mean?" Lily asked. "Don't you want Mommy and Daddy to be together?" Ray questioned. Lily gave a thoughtful before finally saying, "If Mommy's here, I'm fine." Dumbfounded, Ray asked, "What? Why?" "Because Mommy looks sad when she's with Daddy. That's because Daddy's doing something that Mommy hates, right?" "Well, I hate the daddy who makes Mommy sad. I don't need a daddy. I'm fine with just Mommy." "No way?" Ray seemed taken aback by Lily's words. With nothing more to say, he lay down on the bed, his shoulders slumped. When I once again shoved the divorce papers at him, he quickly gave up and signed them. I then hired a lawyer and sought alimony and child support based on evidence of his infidelity. He was also told about the damages by the husband of his mistress, so the amount he had to pay was considerable. His mistress was a junior at his company, and his infidelity was exposed, leading to his dismissal. It's not just an affair, he took a woman's life, so this is just retribution. The double damages drained Ray's savings, and he's now living in a small apartment with his parents after selling his house. I heard that his parents are taking care of their wheelchair-bound son every day. As for me, I've decided to stay at my parents' house for a while with Lily. Once we settle down, I plan to live alone with Lily again, but we thought it would be better for Lily's mental health to live with a lot of people for a while. On our way to daycare, I asked her about the one thing that had been bothering me. "Hey Lily, are you really okay?" "Huh? With what?" "With Daddy not being here. Is it okay with just Mommy and you?" Lily smiled brightly and said cheerfully, "I love Mommy the most. I hate everyone who makes Mommy sad." "I see. Mommy loves Lily too." Lily threw her arms around me with all her strength. Holding my daughter in return, I was determined to protect her for the rest of my life. "Hello there. I'm Alice, a 32-year-old woman, and right now I'm 9 months pregnant. Today, my husband and I are driving to this family's home, just a 30-minute drive from our apartment. We visit them 2 or 3 times a month, and today we're excited because my mother-in-law is baking her famous apple pie. She's a sweet lady who has been through a lot since losing her husband last year but is now eagerly awaiting the birth of her grandchild. However, not everyone is thrilled about our impending arrival. My sister-in-law, Brianna, married 6 years before us and has been struggling with infertility. She started fertility treatments 2 years ago, but there have been no results. The pressure has made her irritable, and my mother-in-law often asks us to visit when Brianna isn't around. To our surprise, Brianna showed up unexpectedly today. Long time no see, Alice. You've put on some weight, haven't you? You're not just lazing around because you're pregnant, right? You look like a seal all round and ready to roll down a hill, she sneered. I was taken aback by her harsh words. Hey, Brianna, how can you say something like that? She's 9 months pregnant. Of course her belly is big. You're going to make enemies with pregnant women all over the world talking like that. My husband quickly defended me. Oh please, I'm just thinking about Alice. It's tough if a pregnant woman gets too heavy. I just want Alice to be aware of her responsibilities as a mother, Brianna retorted. Thank you, sister-in-law. Yes, you're right, I should be more careful, I responded, choosing non-confrontational words. But she wasn't done. Just because you're pregnant doesn't mean you can be lazy. Start cleaning this house right now. You're lacking exercise. You can at least do that much, she said, handing me a broom and dustpan. Before I could respond, my mother-in-law and husband scolded Brianna for her behavior, and she supped off to an upstairs room. I'm sorry, Alice. She just showed up out of nowhere, my mother-in-law apologized. It's fine, I reassured her. I'm sorry too, Alice. That's just how my sister is, my husband added. Despite the incident, we enjoyed a pleasant time together, savoring the apple pie and tea. We called out to Brianna, but she didn't respond. We were worried but continued our day. A few days later, a shocking incident occurred. I went to my in-laws' house alone to speak with my mother-in-law. As I wondered why the front door was unlocked, I found Brianna in the living room. Sister-in-law, what brings you here? I heard you had to work today, I said. I wasn't in the mood, so I took the day off. I was surprised to see you here. You disrupted my cleaning last time. Now get back to work, she demanded, thrusting the broom and dustpan at me. I decided to clean to avoid trouble, but that day I was feeling discomfort from early morning. During the cleaning, I began to feel pain in my stomach. Just as I thought of taking a short break, Brianna kicked my stomach, causing my water to break. The pain escalated, and I fell to the ground. Ah, it hurts. Somebody please help, I cried out. I managed to dial my mother-in-law before losing consciousness. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed with an IV in my arm and my body wrapped in an electric blanket. Where am I? What about my baby? I tried to sit up, but the pain in my abdomen stopped me. My stomach, which was supposed to be large, had shrunk, and I was shocked. I pressed the nurse call button, and when the nurse came, I asked what had happened. Apparently, my water had broken, and I had to give birth via emergency cesarean. The baby was small and in an incubator. The doctor assured us that the baby, though small and in an incubator, was in good health. My mother-in-law and husband, who had rushed in, were informed, and their faces were red with anger. I decided to visit the baby once I felt better and tried to rest to recover quickly. However, the next day, an unbelievable pair showed up in my room, my sister-in-law and her husband. They walked in without knocking. I frowned at their impudence. They suggested, "We'll pay you, let's settle this." A chill ran down my spine. When I didn't agree, they lashed out with every offensive word they could think of, aimed at my tired face. Thinking of what my daughter had endured because of these people, something inside me snapped. A settlement? Are you kidding me? I'll ruin your life, I retorted. The two of them were enraged by my words and continued shouting. What are you saying? We're offering a solution with money here. Aren't you thankful, Alice? Didn't your parents teach you to obey your elders? We're telling you to settle. Just agree quietly. My brother-in-law joined in. As we argued, forgetting it was a hospital room, the doors suddenly swung open. I've heard everything. I'm sorry, but I have absolutely no intention of settling, my husband declared, his deep voice imposing. They didn't expect my husband to show up, and the two who had been so confident until now were completely taken aback. Ah, long time no see, Finn. It's a coincidence to meet you here, my brother-in-law stammered, his face tense. It truly is a coincidence. I didn't expect to meet you here and never imagined I'd hear such words from you two. I would appreciate an explanation. We were all in the room when you said it, So there's no room for any excuses, my husband replied sternly. Hey, don't be so angry, Finn. It's not like we had ill intentions. We just feel bad for what we did to Alice. That's why we're offering money, hoping to settle this out of court, my sister-in-law explained with a trembling voice. But my husband's fury didn't subside. The one who decides whether this will be a settlement or not is Alice, not you. Besides, do you think this is a situation that can be solved with money? Alice had an emergency C-section. The baby is in an incubator. You endangered both their lives. Do you even understand that? My husband exploded, letting his emotions get the best of him. I agree with my husband. No amount of money can make this right. You will face the consequences of your actions, I added, unable to forgive them just because they were throwing money at us. It seemed like my sister-in-law assumed that throwing money at us would make us forgive them, but this situation was not that simple. Thankfully, both my daughter and I, although she was in an incubator, were fine. But had there been any mistake, we might not be here now, and my sister-in-law seemed entirely oblivious to this. I suspected my brother-in-law felt the same way. Thinking about this, I realized I couldn't forgive them or consider a settlement lightly. At my words, my sister-in-law flared up and raised her voice. What do you mean this is all because of her? She knew I couldn't get pregnant, and yet she kept rubbing her belly in front of me. Was that a jab at me? I was furious. That's why I did what I did, to make sure she never does anything like that again, she continued. Now I knew why she had kicked me. But there was something that didn't make sense. I hadn't met Brianna often since I got pregnant, and every time she saw me, she would go into her room and not come out. How did she see me rubbing my belly? That part was a mystery, but no matter what she said, it wouldn't erase what she had done. Neither my husband nor I had any intention of forgiving her. I understand that you're struggling, but that doesn't justify doing something like this to Alice. No matter the reason, endangering a life is never acceptable, my husband explained, stating the obvious. But they each looked elsewhere, not even trying to listen. It seemed like they wanted to get this over with as soon as possible. Seeing their lack of remorse, I felt my condition worsen. Are we done here? I just had surgery and I'm not feeling well. If you continue to cause a ruckus in this room, I'll call the police. Arguing wasn't going to resolve anything, and talking to them was too hard for me as I was still recovering. After my husband kicked them out, I sighed heavily. We had enough evidence because my husband had recorded their conversation. My mother-in-law was also unable to contain her anger because of what her daughter had done, putting my life and that of her grandchild in danger. We decided to press charges against my sister-in-law. We filed a complaint with the police and my sister-in-law was taken to the station. Through a lawyer, we started negotiations, but my sister-in-law insisted, I've done nothing wrong. This woman has been flaunting her pregnancy in front of me, causing me emotional distress when I'm struggling with infertility. She's not innocent either, so she should be open to a settlement. At first, she had been eager to pay any amount of money, but then she began to claim her innocence, insisting we pretend none of this happened because we were both at fault. When she first saw my husband in the hospital, she was visibly intimidated, but now determined to avoid paying, she put up a stubborn fight. However, she had no idea our conversation in the hospital room had been recorded. As soon as the evidence was presented, their faces turned ashen. Even with such clear evidence, you still claim you're innocent. I'm afraid that won't fly, I said. After enduring so much insult and refusing to agree to a settlement, my sister-in-law, in anger, flung the coffee that was before her at us. Thankfully, the coffee was cold, so we didn't get burned. Their outrageous behavior and language in the office resulted in additional charges, forcing them to increase the compensation amount. Trying to calm his infuriated wife, my brother-in-law left the office. With the assault charges against me in the current incident, the amount we demanded for my sister-in-law had become substantial. When we told my mother-in-law what had happened, she looked deeply remorseful, saying, I'm so sorry for what my daughter has done. There's no need for you to agree to a settlement. I'll make sure she faces the consequences, she apologized tearfully. I couldn't help but think, how could a grown-up cause so much distress to their own parents? I felt incredibly sorry for my mother-in-law. In the end, my sister-in-law was asked to pay a hefty compensation. Shocked by the amount, she called me repeatedly, insisting that we reduce it because we were both at fault. I couldn't comprehend how she could make such an argument after all she had done. No matter how many times you call, the answer remains the same. We have no intention of reducing the amount nor agreeing to a settlement. Honestly, your calls are becoming a nuisance. Please stop. I snapped at her. This caused her to lose her temper, and unbelievably, she barged into my apartment. Hey, you're there, right? I know you're in there. Get out here now, coward, she shouted. I was resting on the sofa due to the pain from my surgery when she started pounding on the door, shouting incomprehensible insults. Hey, what on earth are you doing? Is everything okay with you? Your shouting is disturbing everyone else. Please stop, I yelled back while she continued to bang on the door. There were elderly people and families with babies in the apartment, and despite it being past 8 p.m., she was causing such a ruckus. I wondered if she ever considered that people might be sleeping. My husband was still at work and hadn't returned home since I got discharged from the hospital. I've been visiting my daughter every day, feeling unwell, and dealing with her unannounced visit and commotion was pushing me to my wits' end. No matter how many times you come here, my mind won't change. Please don't come here anymore, I said, fighting back despite feeling unwell and pale. My sister-in-law was desperate for a settlement, and my concerns seemed irrelevant to her. I didn't do this because I wanted to, you know. It's because of your intrusions that things have come to this. It's presumptuous of you to get pregnant before me. Shouldn't you have been more considerate and waited to get pregnant after us? It seemed like she saw pregnancy as some sort of competition. I don't think pregnancy is a competition or that it's more honorable to get pregnant first. But for my sister-in-law, who has struggled with infertility for many years, it seemed like she viewed pregnancy in that way. Everyone has different values, but that's no excuse to hurt others. I understand you're upset about not being able to have children, but that's no reason to hurt others. So, I cannot forgive you. You put my daughter in danger, and for that, you will be held responsible, I stated firmly. Above everything else, the fact that she had hurt my daughter was unforgivable. Just then, the sound of sirens could be heard from outside. It seemed that someone in the apartment had reported the disturbance. When you're banging on someone's door and yelling at this hour, it's inevitable that the police would be called. What do you mean the police are here? Open the door. You have to hide me, she pleaded. Despite my sister-in-law's pleas, I had no intention of hiding her. The police arrived at the apartment and began questioning her. I also explained the situation from my perspective. Just at that moment, my husband came back to the apartment, and I filled him in on what had happened. Considering what had happened before, my husband told the police everything, and they took my sister-in-law away in their car. That night, my brother-in-law called to tell me that he was divorcing my sister-in-law and asked me not to involve him in this issue, a rather self-serving request. Apparently, one of my husband's colleagues had been at the hospital where I was admitted and overheard my brother-in-law's conversation. When he got to work, the gossip spread among the female employees, and my brother-in-law was looked down upon. The situation worsened, and somehow the story reached the HR department. My brother-in-law, realizing he couldn't talk his way out of it, confessed everything. He was then told that someone like him couldn't stay in the company and was going to be transferred to a regional office. He said, I can't deal with her issues anymore. If any more problems arise, I'll be fired, so please leave me out of it. With that, he hung up and I haven't heard from him since. Afterward, we received substantial compensation from my sister-in-law, and to ensure she would never come near us again, we changed our phone numbers and moved away. Even if she ran out of money and needed help, she wouldn't know where to find us. A few months later, my daughter was discharged from the hospital. She didn't have any lingering effects and was growing up healthy. Rumor has it that my sister-in-law was in substantial debt. At first, she moved from friend to friend, but she was never contributing to living expenses and stayed far too long, so they kicked her out. With no place to live and no money, she was working part-time to pay off her debt.